Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November 14th, 2022 meeting of the Fiscal Management Committee. My name is Lynn Harris, and I chair this committee, and we will start by introducing my colleagues here at the table, starting to my right.
Judy Daca. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Scott Joftis.
And sitting at the table.
Brian Hull, Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you very much. And as we get started, I just, a little quick point of personal privilege. This is the last time this committee will meet this year, and this is the last time this committee will meet with this composition. And I have so much appreciated working alongside the doctors. Dr. Daca, Dr. Joftis, each of them have brought so much unique expertise and value to the work that we do here, and I so appreciate them. And these are gifts for each of you.
Oh, my goodness.
And these, I just a little plug, these come from the K students at Sherwood.
Okay.
So grown in the greenhouse of our curriculum on ag science education program that we're trying so hard to build up and encourage. So those of you in the vast listening audience, students, these are some of the things you can learn how to grow if you join that program.
And this the second one you brought me from Sherwood. These are beautiful.
And I promised that I would tell you both to maintain the color, put them in the dark for 10 hours a day.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, put them in a closet.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so moving on. The first item on our agenda is the informational summary, which will be posted on board docs by the close of business today. It's not quite ready. So now we're going to move on to the exciting agenda we have, which focuses a lot on sort of our end-of-year financial, fiscal oversight work, both internal and external. And so the first item is Item 3.1, our year-end financial report. And we're being joined by the team. And once they're all settled, I will ask each of them to introduce themselves. And also welcome to the table joining us is our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Murphy. Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Harris, Dr. Joftis. I'm Rob Riley, Associate Superintendent of Finance.
Good morning. I'm Dan Kelly, Director of the Division of Financial Services.
Good morning. I'm Bill Early, a principal at Clifton Larson Allen, the external audit firm.
So we did a little switch here. We're going to have Dan talk about the year-end financial report first. And just to give you a little preview, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is compliance related, but we'll also be talking about other projects too. So in addition to compliance, getting everybody paid, getting our vendors paid, getting our audits and reports done on time, we also do innovative work within Office of Finance too. So we'll get to that later. So Dan?
Well, good morning. As Rob just mentioned, I'm here to outline the financial report, sort of talk through the process of how we put the report together, and then how it relates to the external audit. So this report is now known as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR. It is a 140-page report made up of about 20 statements, about 50 additional schedules, the management discussion and analysis, and the related footnotes. The report covers the financial data of our 10 funds. The primary fund is our general fund, but we also have 2 other governmental funds, 1 internal service fund, 4 proprietary funds, and 2 fiduciary funds. The fiduciary funds are our pension and OPEB funds, and our Actuaries GRS will present on both of those funds later. And Phoebe Kwan, our Director of Investments, will present specifically on the pension fund later as well. So the auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA, come on site for a couple weeks in the late spring, early summer, and then spend about 5 to 7 weeks working with us in August and September to audit the financial statements, the underlying data, and the related internal controls. So this year we had to implement a new Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement. It's GASB number 87 is what they call it. And it clarifies the reporting over leases to move leases onto the balance sheet. GASB 87 was one of the most difficult standards to implement in the last several years and caused delays in the issuance of our report. Many other local school districts were also delayed in their reports in FY 2022 due to the complex standard. This standard was brought up in previous meetings, so you may be aware of this, and I'm sure Bill Early here will talk more about that in his presentation next. Along with the hurdle of implementing GASB 87, we're also working in our first full year in our new cloud accounting software, the Hub. So this caused some delays during the year related to kind of learning new processes and implementing the new processes. There were certain accounts that needed to be treated differently because of the way the system works compared to the old system. So with that, there was some troubleshooting at year end to run new reports and get through our year end close. But overall, the new system is going to help make things more efficient, long-term, better reports, better processes overall, but it's just that implementation stage is always tough. As you can tell, the ACFR and the related audit is a big endeavor. We have about 50 people that I coordinate with throughout MCPS and several teams in accounting, finance, budget, investments, payroll, HR, procurement, construction, internal audit, and others. So clearly, the whole team's working on this, and that's not to mention the help we get from Bill's team at CLA and the work we do with GRS, our actuaries. So I sincerely want to thank everyone for all their hard work on this to make sure we completed our ACFR this year. Overall, we choose to look at this audit process as an opportunity. We know we're not perfect. We're always looking for ways to improve our systems, our controls, and our reporting. So we kind of look at this as an opportunity. That's really, we want to make sure that we're always improving in those areas. We know that this year was delayed, so we have a few corrective items already in place to improve on that for next year. We are going to work to improve the timing of when we start and complete certain processes, starting with our leasing standards. We may change some of who works on what processes to make sure we're using our resources as efficiently as possible. And then we're also going to look at overall control improvements to make sure we meet this deadline next year. So therefore, we do expect that next year we will have some gained efficiencies to be able to meet the deadline. This next year also comes with the new challenge of another GASB pronouncement. It's GASB number 96. This standard is to work to improve the subscription-based software accounting. And similar to the leasing standard, it moves these subscriptions onto the balance sheet. So I'm sure Bill will cover that in more detail as well. And before I kick it off to Bill, are there any other questions you all have?
No, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So again, Bill Early from CLA, the external auditors. I did put together a PowerPoint. I don't know if they were pulling it up or if you all just have the handouts there. But overall, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit of that PowerPoint to echo kind of what Dan said. First off, that document that Dan presented, while we are the external auditors, we only provide 3 pages of that, which is the actual audit report, independent auditors report in there. Everything else is the work of Dan's team. So it was a very challenging year for them based on, as Dan mentioned, the hub getting implemented. And that process was twofold, right? They had to learn how to implement it from an accounting standpoint. And then when we came in, we asked for audit documentation. They had to figure out and go back and say, how do we get that audit documentation out of the hub, right? And sometimes we had a lot of going back and forth to massage the data to where it met the standards that we were able to then audit that information. So it was a 2-time learning curve. So it was like, we got it done, we learned it, we did the accounting for it, and then we came in and threw the curveballs, and they had to adjust to that too. As well as Dan mentioned GASB 87, which was, and that's the Government Accounting Standards Board, to which you follow all of their announcements that they have to implement every year. Historically, when I started 25 years ago, there was one GASB every 3, 4, 5 years. And then in the past, I'd say 5 years, 10 years, they're rolling out 2 to 3 a year. Some don't apply, but because you all have pensions and OPEB, and the complexity of your school district, most of them, almost every single one of them that comes out does apply to you all. So it is a challenge more and more because as they've come out, they roll them out fast, they're not as clear as they used to be, so there's a lot of, then they issue what they call amended ones. So it's a real challenge moving forward these days, and Dan mentioned 96 is coming next year. Because part of the problem too is that a lot of the GASBs, a lot of times it's just an accounting standards, right? So you're just implementing an accounting standard. With leases, all the accounting department doesn't have, all the finance department, they don't have all the leases. So they got to work with the other departments, the schools and everybody to pull all these leases together. So it's not as simple as we just got to record a transaction to finish them. It's a lot of collaboration throughout the year and throughout implementing that system. GASB 96 is what we call SBITAs for subscription-based technology agreements, is going to be even more challenging because a lot of those are at the program level. So again, it's not that finance holds them all. You're going to have to, Dan's going to have to be coordinating with the program levels to see, do you have textbook subscriptions? Where does all this lie? And those people then are on the program side don't always understand why the finance side may need it. So it is a lot of coordination, a lot of challenge. So while we did issue the financial statements late this year, MSD was notified that they were going to be late, and they were issued before any funding adjustments were withheld. Is what MSD could do is if you don't file by a certain date, they will withhold some of your funding. You never lose the funding. It's always withheld and delayed a period, but we were able to get them in before that happened this year. As Dan mentioned, you're not the only school district that had this challenge this year. There were several others. We audit a majority of the ones in the central part of the state, the larger districts. Several of them were delayed this year, mostly because of the GASB 87 implementation. It was a lot larger of an overhaul than anyone had expected for school districts, and a lot of changes to the financial statements. So that was the main reason for that. The hub caused some additional delays, I would say, but as Dan said, there's efficiency in place. One thing I will comment on is that your finance department has always been, when Rob was there, now with Dan there, they've always been good about when we have best practices or any findings we bring forward. They're always very quick to want to know A, the details, B, how can it be affixed for future years, and can be avoided in future years. So I'm going to go through there. I'll kind of highlight the one we reported this year, but if we can go to the next slide. So the document is rather large, as Dan said. It's over 100 and some pages long. The management discussion analysis on pages 18 to 31, if you do get time, that is where you want to read. That's really a high-level analysis, and I bring that forward every year. That's, again, written by management. It actually technically is unaudited, but we do read it to make sure it agrees to all the financial information inside of it. I'm going to run through a couple of the highlights here, but again, if you ever get a chance to read it, pages 18 and 31, it's a year-to-year comparison, a very good analysis at that high level. Because again, I don't think anybody except for GASB expects anybody to read every page of the annual financial report. But government-wide total net position, you had $284 million. Unrestricted of that was only $3.1 million. You did increase net position on the positive side by $60.8 million. Next slide. So governmental funds, that is the main funds that you operate under, and I'm going to highlight the general fund, as Dan said. You do have 10 funds, but the general fund is the main fund in which you operate in. But you did have a fund balance of $87.5 million. Unassigned of that was 4.8. Everything else was designated, was either assigned or committed or restricted. Any grant money that you get is always restricted, or if it's restricted by an outside source. So that's a large piece of it as well. You had a change in fund balance of a loss of $6.9 million. And if you look on page 67 of the ACFR, that would actually provide you the detail of what is in fund balance. I put that on there because a lot of times that's what some boards ask, is for that detail, so we do include that. On the general fund side, you had $86.9 million of fund balance, of which again 4.8 was unassigned, the same amount of loss, 6.9. You had revenues of $3 billion, other financing sources of $63 million, and expenditures of $3 billion. So quite a large school system when you think about it. You're talking, that's not millions, that's billions of dollars you're overseeing, and that the finance is responsible for accounting for. Next slide. Non-GAAP, oh, we missed one. The non-GAAP budgetary basis was the If we can go back slide, there we go. Revenues were $270.3 million. Expenses were 311.3, and an ending budgetary basis of 4.9. While we actually have to show the financial statements, and the way they work is the very front statements I talk about government-wide. That's how you see the financial statements if you are operating a true business perspective. It includes all the liabilities, all the lease liabilities, all long-term liabilities. The budgetary basis statements is the one you use on a day-to-day basis to manage the school system's operations. That's how you spend all that time in the beginning doing a budget each year, and that's what you kind of manage to on a daily basis. So budgetary expenditures over revenues was 31.9 compared to a budget decrease of 64.9, so you had some savings there. Budget to actual schedule is found on page 40 of the annual comprehensive report. And per MSD requirements, we are required to report if there are any negative expenditure variances in any of the 13 set MSD categories, which there were none. So again, proper job of managing the budget and the expenditures to budget. Next slide. So again, we do, the financial statements are audited in two pieces. What I'm here today is reporting on the annual comprehensive financial report. The second piece I will be, we'll be performing now. We're almost through it. I'd say we're 75% done. It's due by 12/31 to the city, and that's an audit of all your federal dollars. And as you can imagine, those federal dollars have grown tremendously over the past 2 years, so that's increased a lot of the work. Last year, there was an extension to June 30th to follow it. This year, there is no extension from MSDE, and those funds, those reports must be followed by 12/31, which I will say at this point, we are on track to do. Again, that includes a lot of collaboration by Dan. A lot of the information is not within finance. He has to go to HR, payroll, to pull all the timesheets, sometimes the schools. So Dan's and Sherry, they do a lot of time coordinating with the program people to get us the information we need. So it's not as simple as print out a report, hand it to the auditors, and they go away. It's a lot of collaboration between us, Dan, and then out to the program people. Next slide. So the reports we issue, I talked about the auditor's report. Again, you did receive a clean audit opinion. That's the highest level of assurance we can provide on the financial statements. It provides, does not provide absolute assurance, but reasonable assurance. We don't audit every number. I know legislative auditors come in. You might have Department of Education auditors come in. We look at it from, we use materiality, so we don't look at every transaction, every number. We look at what we consider the significant risk areas when we do our external audit. In addition, we issue a report on internal controls over the school system, and then we also issue a report on internal controls over each major program for the single audit. And then lastly, we issue what's called governance communication, which I'm going to go through and cover with you. That is a letter to governance, the board, who's responsible overseeing the school system's operations. Next slide. So results. So I mentioned that we obtained reasonable, not absolute assurance. We do assess the accounting principles used and any significant estimates made by management. We compare those to the industry standards. We go through, and if there was any questions, we would challenge those with management. I can say that all the estimates we looked at were reasonable. This year, we didn't have any areas of concern for us. And then we also evaluate the overall financial presentation of the financial statement. So once Dan's team puts it together, which takes several weeks, then we get it and we spend a significant amount of time going through and tying out every number, footing every number, adding it all up, and that's about a 1 to 2 week process in itself that we go through. Next slide. As I mentioned, there was an unmodified, also known as a clean opinion. It does read different. If you are one of those people that goes back and looks at last year compared to this year, you will see that it does read different. That was a change by auditing standards, so we were required to change the formatting. I will say while it reads different, it's just it's more detailed, but it has the same audit results in it, which is an unmodified opinion. There you see we dated October 25th. We did an emphasis of matter paragraph that was included this year. That was strictly for the inclusion of the change in accounting principle, which was the adoption of GASB 87, as we mentioned, which you were required to do. Next, we issued our auditor's report on internal control. We did issue a material weakness this year. So that may, some people say, should we be concerned? I would say that no. While we did have to report it, we are required by auditing standards to report it. What it was is, again, going back to the hub, there was a lot of information that came to us. Reconciliations were different this year. Some were, we were audited. We audit at the same time. A lot of information is getting reconciled and completed. Auditing standards require that if we do find an audited adjustment, even before management has had a chance to finish it, we would report that in there. So between that and then we had some adjustments with the leases, some computation changes, some classification changes that were made back and forth. You did consult with outside vendor to help with the lease implementation. Again, tremendous overhaul there. So we had some adjustments related to there. That's not normal for MCPS. Again, that GASB was such a large volume of transactions that it just, and it was getting done rather late because of all the information needed from all the program levels and all the outside of finance departments. If I was sitting there, if I was somebody on the fiscal committee, would I have grave concern? No. I think I'd have confidence in Dan and Rob's team that they're going to make the adjustments needed. They've already done it. They've issued their management letter response in here. But if I was you all, I would just monitor it. But they've already adjusted it, and I have been working with them for several years now. I would have confidence that, yes, they take it seriously, and they've already made the adjustments. A lot of it is also due to staffing. While there's new GASBs coming out, there's new reporting, the administration of the federal dollars, you haven't really expanded your staff in the finance department, A. And B, there's been, some positive turnover. Some people have been advanced, some people are in new roles, a new assistant controller. So there's been a lot of change there. So some stability over the next year or so will also help within the department. We had no other management letter comments that we brought forward to anyone's attention. We had some verbal comments from our IT group that met with IT of the school systems and went through them, but nothing of concern that we had to elevate to management or your level of concern. Next slide. Single audit report that is, again, I said in process. You did qualify as a low risk auditee. You see, usually we have about, I'd say, 2 to 3 programs. You see again this year. We have 5 programs again this year. A lot of that is because of the ESSER funds coming in and the SLRF funds coming in. So all of those COVID funds some of them are automatically deemed high risk by the federal government. So we have to test those, but just a tremendous amount of federal funds coming in now that requires more auditing. So we've gone from 2 to 3 programs a year to an average of 4 to 5 every year now at this point. So, and that trend will probably continue for at least another year or so. Next slide. So I also said we issued our separate letter to governance. I'm going to highlight some of these things real quick. Again, we've talked about the issuance of implementation of GASB 87. Note 1 to your financial statement is where you will see the accounting principle change related to GASB 87, as well as your other significant accounting policies that are outlined there. Next slide. So uncorrected and corrected adjustments we had for the real estate fund over cash, accounts receivable, and GASB 87 leases. The real estate fund used to be a minor fund. Now it is a major fund under the reporting requirements because that's where a lot of the 87 implementation and leases were accounted for. We had no disagreements with management, no issues discussed prior to us being retained as the auditors, no issues related to the group audit, and we were not notified by management. They consulted with any other accountants during the audit to kind of get a second opinion that they just worked just with us. Next slide. There's your significant accounting estimates that we tested. Same 3 we've tested every year. Pension, OPEB, self-insurance, including IB&R. And again, that's another, because of you have your own OPEB, your own pension, that's another piece that a lot of the actuarial reports are coming in. They have to get updated late in the game just because they need the 6/30 year-end numbers before the actuary can actually do their part. So then they have to do their part. They have to then get it to Dan, has to go in. So a tremendous amount of coordination and collaboration go into this thing at the end, and that's why it's always right up to the last minute. Like, some people be like, why can't you get this done in August? It's just there's not enough hours in the day to get it done then. I will say on that note, I know a couple of the other school systems have already started talking to their representatives at the state level to say, why do we have to issue this by 9:30 to MSDE, and why the deadline hasn't changed in years, but the accounting complexity of all these school systems has changed. So there is some communication, I think, among the local school district level and among the CFOs to sit and talk to say, should we be asking MSD that should this be due 9:30 or should this be due 10:15 or 10:30, just to allow for the additional time. You don't want to rush through, and that's another reason we issued a little bit later. We didn't want to rush through. You'd rather take the extra time and be late and have it accurate than rush through and have an inaccurate report that's just followed timely. I don't know if Rob wants to speak to that later or not, but I know some other school districts are starting that conversation with their local representatives. We did not identify any significant unusual transactions. Next slide. Here's our audit risk. We had 3 this year. The first 2 are always there. Management override of controls. Just means management could go in and make journal entries. So we go through and test those to make sure that everything was proper, controls were in place. Improper revenue recognition, mainly around your grant accounting, is where we look at. Implementation of 87 was a large one. Then we also do test of controls over your payroll, non-payroll. We do IT testing, grant compliance testing, and we look at all the financial disclosures. So those are the areas we spend most of our time. Again, we don't hit every account balance. Some are immaterial. So even if they were completely wrong, they wouldn't impact your overall audit report. Next slide. So lastly, we talked about 96. That's coming next year. Dan's already been working to kind of start gathering some of that information to get it through. Again, it's going to require a lot of calculations, going back. You have to read through the subscription. Lease accounting wasn't just get the leases, look at the schedule. You actually had to read through, look at the terms, determine if it met the standards of GASB. So it's not as simple as just grab it, get the numbers out of it, and move on. So it does require a tremendous amount of time. But I know they are working on this one now so that it doesn't come up late at the end of next year. Next slide should be any slides for questions.
Okay. So I'm going to ask my colleagues first. Any questions, Dr. Dr. Joftis?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the team for such a good audit report. I guess I'd like to step out, if I could, just a little bit and ask whether, based on the work that you do in preparing for the audit, knowing that we have a clean audit, I'd be curious to hear from the 3 of you what you see as sort of the biggest financial or operational control concerns that you have going forward, and that could be outside of sort of the auditable data or findings. What big concerns, I guess, do you have going forward from a financial and operational concern standpoint?
Thanks, Dr. Joftis. Yeah, from financial and operational, as Bill alluded to, ESSER's become a big part. Our federal funding went from 3% to 14% if you include all of that ESSER funding. So that's an area as well too. Another area too that we've been talking about too is staffing. We've been doing a lot with the same amount of staff, which across the state, everybody's kind of in that same boat. But to follow up on what Bill was saying as to the deadline, and I agree too, I don't think we should be rushing to get to that 9:30 deadline. There are other CFOs out there that are saying even if we push it 2 weeks to 10:15, that would be helpful. The other side of that is that, as you know, we're a component unit of our of our local government. So they're pushing us because until we're done, they can't finish their reporting too. So that's the other side of that too. But I would say being able to staff and have that knowledge. Can you speak a little bit more
about staffing? What are we talking about sort of in terms of
we were looking, our Office of Finance, I don't think we've increased staff in many, many years. So what we're doing is we're utilizing staff within different divisions and departments to help out in peak times. But the work is increasing. So, and as noted, the GASB statements have been increasing at a higher level than usual, as well as our budget too. So, like our budget folks too, we haven't really increased there, and our budgets, as noted in previous meetings, has gone from $2 billion to $3 billion in a short period of time. So.
Can you give us a sense of scale of what you're talking about in terms of staffing? Are we talking about 1 or 2? Or are we talking about 10 to 20?
Yeah, I would say anything would be an improvement. 10 to 20, I think, is too much. I think 1 to 2 kind of puts us in each of the different areas, puts us in a good situation. One of the other things that you'll hear about later on today is we're going through the HCM project, which is our human capital management, which is the last phase of our Oracle Cloud implementation. And as noted at the last fiscal management meeting, we are seeing struggles there because the same folks that are helping us get through these new I mentioned innovation. This will be an innovation to our system. We're using the same staff. We didn't have the luxury of like having people that we could just say, hey, you're going to work on that project. So it's competing projects as well as doing our normal work. In this case, it's the new GASBs. In Erskine, it's the new project. In all the other areas of finance, there's additional things that we're doing that we weren't doing in the past.
Okay. I think my last question, and this is a very ill-informed question, so bear with me with the naivete. Pensions, can you say a little bit more about just sort of the health?
So we actually, the next item, we'll be talking about pensions. And just as Bill mentioned, some of our estimates are for pension and OPEB. And when you hear from the pension folks, we do two different valuations. We do a valuation for what goes into our financial report, and we do a valuation for budget, which kind of tells us what do we have to be putting in to make that OPEB fund and pension fund healthier than it is.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. So first, I just want to say congratulations to the team on what is, by all standards, a very good audit report, so thank you for that. And I'm going to ask Mr. Riley here to speak a little bit. We've heard about the delay this year, and we did miss that September 30th deadline, so I'm going to have him speak a little bit more about some of the corrective action that we're putting in place going forward so that this doesn't happen next year. It was related to the change in the accounting standards and then some back and forth with our external auditor. So I'll ask him to speak a little bit about what we're doing going forward to address that. But I also did want to just chime in on the staffing issues. Coming in from the outside, I share those concerns. I'm looking at an office that is managing, a $3 billion budget, plus all of the grants they're managing, plus all of the payroll and everything that ERSC does. So it's a lot. The staffing levels are very thin, and I think you see this in school districts a lot. When there is new money to invest, it goes on the programmatic side into schools, but when the cuts come, they come across the board, including operations and finance, and what you end up doing is kind of whittling down the operational backbone of a school district. And so I just wanted to express my concerns that I share there, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Riley to just talk a little bit about how we're going to move forward and avoid any late submissions.
Yes, so one of the main things, as Dan had mentioned, is starting earlier. It's easier said than done, right? Because we really, what's in the financial report is based on 6:30. But we found areas where we can kind of look at certain aspects of the financial report that we can do before 6:30. So normally that's kind of our starting point, but we can do some of the groundwork before in our scheduling. So that's one of the main areas. Also, too, you'll hear about it later. Regarding that project that I mentioned, we have added some staff to help with that because Erskine is a big part of gathering the information we need, as well as Dan mentioned. We're working with 10 or 12 different divisions within the system that's getting the PBC or prepared by client documentation that goes into here. So that's going to help as well too. So those are two areas that we feel like we can make strong strides to guarantee that it won't be late next year.
I'll add from the outside perspective if I could. So several of the school districts that we work on, they have added additional staffing, especially within the grants area. For one grants accountant to see an increase in 11% just from the federal government, let alone what the increase coming from the state grants is, that is an area where they have added additional resources too, because again, one grant accountant to do all of that work, and that's essentially kind of what you guys, same structure as all the school districts have, usually one grant accountant. So that's been another area that's been expanding, and again, Mr. Hall, as you said, the finance department, right, that all the money's coming in, but it's going out to the programs, but somebody's got to do the accounting for it and the compliance side of it. As well as too, when the budget department may say, hey, we're going to move these expenditures over, that's some of the challenges too, is they need to be working with finance to say, can we do that based on the grant? What kind of documentation do we need to have to then make sure that we're still in compliance with that? So that's a tremendous amount of work there too as well. So again, while it was delayed, it was some of the pieces you're waiting on too, like you've invested a lot of your OPEBs is invested in the county system. That report's not issued until the 29th or 30th of September every year. So by making that decision, and I'm not here to say that it's the right or wrong decision, but again, that puts an additional burden on the fact that you're waiting for a piece of information. As the auditors, we can't issue until those numbers are audited by somebody else and given us the final report. You may have the draft report, which comes middle of September, but the final is not coming until the very end. So all of those decisions are things that are impacting the finished report, and that's why, again, if you go back, that September 30th deadline's been there for years. You didn't even have to report pensions in your financial statements when that deadline was established. And now you're waiting on the actuary, which is waiting on the county, which, I mean, it's just a snowball effect as decisions are made and changes are made during times. And if anybody's aware, we're all aware of what's going on the outside of the economy. I mean, staffing is not an issue that is going away anytime soon based on just the labor force that's out there. And finding, even if you did open recs for 1 to 2 people, it's probably going to be a challenge to find those at this point. But yes, the additional staffing will drastically help the process.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, first of all, a little context for the uninitiated, looking at all the dates of the reporting and the work that's happening, bear in mind we do work on a July 1 to June 30 fiscal. So when they say, we have to get X done by September 30th, that's, 3 months after the end of the fiscal. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I too want to express my thanks for the work that happens here. I am just getting to almost 2 years since I was appointed to lead this committee, and didn't really know the scope of what I was getting into. But I'm just so continuously impressed by and grateful for the depth and quality of work done in the school system, which I think is a reflection of everyone's appreciation for the fact that we are a public school system. Public education is a public good, and we are funded by the public. And so we have a fiduciary responsibility to be very, very transparent with how we use that money, and to make sure, as Dr. Joftis has been so good at continuously reminding us and helping us focus on, we are using that money in ways that are actually achieving our strategic goals. And so and one of the things I've most enjoyed about this committee, aside from its scintillating content, is the people. This team that I get to work with continuously. I so enjoy working with them because they are just so uniformly excellent at what they do. So I don't have many questions. One, though, is speaking of scintillating reading, the annual comprehensive financial report, is this online for anybody to see?
Yes, that's online on the financial services page, as well as the single audit reports, which for the years. We have them by year. Just a little notation too. You see the color there. So we've coordinated our colors. So that corresponds to the budget book from FY22. So it's a cycle. Starts with budget, ends with the ACFR. So.
Got it. Everything is coordinated. And just another quick question. So we've talked a lot about the GASB standards and how they increase the complexity of the work and the time it takes to do the work. But can you, looking at it from the other side, what advantages do you see to the system, given our fiduciary responsibility of transparency, of implementing like GASB 87 and incorporating kind of that lease work into the bigger picture financial reporting that we do?
All these GASBs, although they're tough to implement, they do have benefits. So going back to our pension, GASB 75 and GASB 67 for OPEB and pension, those really benefited because in the old days you wouldn't have to put that liability on your balance sheet. So by doing that, by GASB forcing all the school districts to do that, you kind of get a good picture of where school districts are long term, as well as these leases too. They're all intended for a specific purpose, but it really highlights those governmental entities that may be struggling that it wasn't apparent before. So as we mentioned, some of these things puts things on the balance sheet so it's available for all folks to see. So that's one of the benefits I see from these as these GASBs roll out.
Yeah. Okay. So before we move on, I'll ask one more time. Questions, Dr. Daka?
I don't exactly have a question, but I want to thank our staff for the kind of work that they do and connecting with, I thought I said something wrong. Connecting with the outside auditors and the 13 recommendations. See, I think small because I came from schools and I know that some of these things are really difficult to handle, and that we're moving over from paper, pencil, or computer kinds of indications with payroll and with human resources. Those are things that needed to be overhauled, and I know that we're working on that now. We have done an incredible job with the old-fashioned system that we have, so I'm glad to see that we're moving forward on that. And having come from a school, I know that that general account is the one that's really difficult, trying to get our staff to put their budget in and then to turn in all the work that they need to turn in so that you can figure out how much the schools have spent and how much has been spent on them. So thank you. Those are just some of the things that I've really noticed.
Yeah, and anything else before we move on, any of you want to add before we move on to the next topic? Okay, thank you very much. So I now, they gave a little bit of coming attractions, talking a lot about our pension and OPEB funds. And so now we're going to be moving on to item 4.1, which is our actuarial valuations, getting to our MCPS pension and OPEB funds. Our actuarials from GRS Consulting are joining us virtually. Oh, there they are. Hello. From Chicago. And this just gets to another area of the work. And I do, which is our fiduciary duty to our employees and our retirees, to be good stewards of the funds that they and we have invested for their benefit and pension packages. And I just want to, as we start into the kind of the reporting on this, reflect on something and a conversation that I had within the last week with a retired teacher. He was reflecting on, everything is in the news about school systems and teachers leaving the profession and staff openings and, occasionally somewhat fraught back and forth in the media about the negotiations with some associations about our salary and benefit packages. And that employee reflected to me, he said, you all need to really sell the fact that the pension and benefits packages that you provide are really, really unparalleled. And he reflected that through the fact that as a career employee of the system, he and his family had undergone multiple major medical issues of very great significance and very long-term and in-depth and intensive medical need. And he said through that entire process, because of the benefit package that he received through MCPS, their family's total financial obligation was $1,000. So, that is something to sell when we're looking to be a destination employer. Part of that is how we take care of the life needs of our employees. So, I appreciate that, and I know.
And I want to support what you said, because I know that we talk about losing teachers. We really haven't lost that many teachers because of what happened for those 2 years. The numbers are pretty comparable, but I think it's because of our benefits package. We look at the salaries that other people or other systems are paying, and they seem to look higher, but not when you look at the benefits that they provide. So I think it's really important, and of course I'm a recipient of all of that. I was a retired administrator, and I'm going to be shortly retired from this too.
So that being said, I will kick it off to you, Mr. Riley, to start, and then we'll bring in our friends from Chicago.
Sure. As I mentioned before, our GRS, our actuary partners, I'm going to introduce Phoebe Kwan, our Director of Investments first, but she's actually going to follow GRS. And with GRS, we have Amy Williams, Lance Weiss, and Casey Rappaport. And I'm just going to pass it off to them, and I believe they have a PowerPoint as well, too.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Williams from GRS, and as Rob said, I'm joined by Lance Weiss and Cassie Rappaport. We're here to present the results of the actuarial valuations as of July 1st, 2022 for the pension plan and the OPEB, or the other post-employment other than pension benefits actuarial valuations. We do have a PowerPoint that we've prepared. We have the agenda on page 2 of that presentation. We do have a section to go over the pension actuarial valuation, the OPEB actuarial valuation. However, we do have some background information on the actuarial valuation process that we do think would be helpful to set the stage before we start going through the actuarial valuation results. So we would like to actually start on slide 24 of this presentation to start off with that background, and Lance is going to go over that information.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, if you could turn. Thank you very much. So as Amy said, we've got some background material. It's really kind of a refresher on the methodology and terminology that we use. We think it's really a good idea to kind of go through this real briefly. I will not spend a lot of time, but it really is going to put the results in. You're going to understand the results better once you understand why, and how these results are used. So the purpose of an actuarial valuation, for this valuation, as Amy said, we performed it as of July 1, 2022, and it's one of the main results of the valuation is the funded status. And the funded status really is just the assets divided by the liabilities, or that ratio. Another purpose of the actuarial valuation is to determine the annual contribution requirement, and this is for fiscal year 2024. So it's for the fiscal year July 1, 23 through June 30, 24. And then the last purpose is to provide supporting information and documentation. So if you could turn the next page, please. Thank you. So you're probably all wondering, what does the actuary do? Well, the actuary does, we take into account everything that's known, all of the current facts, and I'll tell you about that in one more slide. We make assumptions, what are called actuarial assumptions. We make assumptions about everything that's not known. And then basically we figure out the annual contributions that are needed to contribute to the fund to pay the benefits and expenses net of investment return. And this whole process is really called the actuarial valuation. So if you turn the page, thank you. So this is really kind of the process. So the column of items on the left, covered member data, asset data, plan provisions, assumptions and methods, and the funding policy, those are all the inputs to our actuarial valuation. So the middle column is the actuarial valuation. That is basically, we take the inputs, we run it through our valuation, and then the items on the far right, funded status, contribution rates, and accounting information, those are the outputs of the actuarial valuation process. So it's pretty simple. It looks pretty simple on paper, but it's very, very complicated. And there's a number, as I said, a number of inputs, and the actuarial valuation report is really kind of the output of our valuation process itself. So if you turn the page. So one of the things we want to mention is that we use what's called an actuarial value of assets for the pension valuation. And basically what we do is we smooth out fluctuations in market value over a 5-year period. And the whole idea is to dampen the volatility of contribution rates. If we were to use pure market value, the contributions that are determined by our valuation would go up or down based on the market value. But by smoothing it, we can dampen those contribution rate changes such that it's a much smoother pattern of contribution rates. And I also should mention that for purposes of the OPEB valuation, the other post-employment benefits plan valuation, we are using market value assets. You turn the page. Thank you. So in terms of the selection of actuarial assumptions, we use, as I said earlier, it is pretty complicated. We do use a number of different actuarial assumptions to value both the pension and the OPEB plan. For pension, and we kind of split the assumptions into two kind of buckets: economic assumptions, which are kind of based on what's happening in the economy, and the demographic assumptions, which are basically your people assumptions. So on the economic side, it's investment return, payroll growth, population growth. For the OPEB plan, we also look at healthcare trend rates and per capita claims costs. On the demographic side, for both pension and OPEB, we look at, what are the rates of retirement? When do people retire? What are their pay increases, rates of disability, rates of turnover, and rates of mortality? And then for the OPEB side, we also look at participation assumptions. In terms of who selects it, basically it's the actuary with assistance from others. So on the economic side, we together with other advisors and staff select the actuarial economic assumptions. In terms of the demographic assumptions, that's pretty much the actuary and staff. If you could turn 3 pages up to page 31, slide 31. Thank you. So just want to kind of give you a real brief, summary of the current funding policy. So basically, the funding policy is the total contribution equals normal cost plus amortization of the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. And normal cost is the cost of pensions accruing during the year. So that's the current cost of what's being accrued during the year. Amortization of the unfunded is exactly as it sounds. We're taking that unfunded actuarial accrued liability and amortizing it. It's sort of like a mortgage payment. For both the pension valuation and the OPEB valuation, we amortize the unfunded as a level percentage of pay, which means that the contribution rate as a percentage of pay remains level, but as dollars go up, as payroll goes up, the contribution dollar amount increases. In terms of the amortization amortization period, for the OPEB valuation, we are amortizing the unfunded liability on a 30-year open period, which means that each year we reset the amortization period to 30 years. For the pension valuation, we're doing a 15-year open amortization for any pension unfunded liability not attributable to plan changes. For plan changes, we're doing it on a closed basis, which means that, for example, the 30-year closed period is used for a pension unfunded attributable to the 2006 and 2010 plan changes, but that 30 years decreases by 1 each year. So at some point, after the 30-year initial period, those unfunded liabilities will be 100% completed. We funded it all. And that's kind of a summary, kind of, as I said, just a real brief refresher. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to.
So I would just say for the uninitiated, when we're talking about OPEB funds, that stands for other post-employment benefits. But other than that, good.
All right, I'm going to turn this back to, I think, who am I turning this back to? Cassie. And she's going to go through some of the pension results. So if you could put slide 4 back up.
Can we pull the PowerPoint back up? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lance, and good morning, everyone. As Lance mentioned, I will be discussing the pension valuation results this morning. So first up, we have changes from last year's valuation. There have been no plan provision changes since the last actuarial valuation performed as of July 1st, 2021. Next slide, please. assumptions from the last valuation performed as of July 1st, 2021. However, we are recommending that an experience study be performed prior to the next valuation, which will be performed as of July 1st, 2023. This experience study would cover the 4-year period from July 1st, 2018 through July 1st, 2022. And as part of the study, we would review all of the current demographic and economic actuarial assumptions. Next slide, please. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of the 2021 and 2022 actuarial valuation results. As you can see at the top, there has been an overall increase in membership from 46,813 members to 48,494 members, and that's an increase of about 3.6%. And there was an increase across the board in the number of actives, inactives, as well as the retirees and beneficiaries. Next, we have the actuarial accrued liability, and there was an overall increase in liabilities from $2.4 billion to $2.5 billion this year, or an increase of about $114 million. The liabilities also increased for actives, inactives, and retirees and beneficiaries. The actuarial value of assets, which, as Lance mentioned, is the smoothed value of assets, increased from about $2.1 billion to $2.2 billion, or an increase of about $97 million. The unfunded liability, or the difference between the accrued liability and the assets, increased from about $345 million to $361 million, and the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets decreased from 85.9% to 85.8%. On a market value of assets basis, the funded ratio decreased from 93.5% to 79.9%. And as you can see, the difference in the market value funded ratio is much greater than the change in the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets. And that is due to the volatility of the market value of assets from year to year. And as Lance mentioned, for the actuarial valuation, we use the smooth value of assets or the actuarial value of assets. So the estimated returns this year were negative 9.6% on a market value basis and 5.6% on an actuarial value basis, compared to the assumed rate of return of 6.75%. Next slide, please. So here we have the annual contribution requirements based on the 2021 and 2022 valuation results. And those valuations determine the required contributions for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. So the total annual required contribution is made up of the normal cost and amortization payment components. And the total annual required contribution increased this year from about $92.7 million to $95.2 million. The board contribution requirement is equal to the total contribution minus the expected employee contributions, and that increased from about $65.4 million to $67.3 million, or an increase of about $1.9 million. And then near the bottom of the slide, we have the board contribution as a percentage of payroll, which increased from 3.73% last year to 3.77% this year. Next slide, please. So here we have the breakdown of the required contribution between the core and supplemental plans. As a reminder, the core benefits are for non-teachers only, since teachers are a part of the Maryland State Teachers Pension System, and the supplemental benefits apply to both teachers and non-teachers. The core benefit contribution requirement is 1.81% of payroll, and the supplemental benefit contribution requirement is 1.96% of payroll, and that makes up the total contribution of 3.77% of payroll. So the core benefits account for about 48% of the total contribution. Next slide, please. Here we have the reconciliation of the unfunded liability. The blue bars represent the unfunded liabilities as of July 1st, 2021 and July 1st, 2022. The red line in between the blue bars represents the different gains and losses the plan experienced during the year. Under the current funding policy, we do expect the unfunded liability to decrease each year. But there was unfavorable asset experience this year, as I mentioned before, with an estimated negative 9.6% return on a market value basis and a 5.6% return on an actuarial value basis. This is compared to an assumed rate of return of 6.75%, which resulted in a loss of about $21 million based on the actuarial value of assets. There was a slight gain due to lower than expected salary increases, and there was a $16 million loss due to higher than expected cost of living increases for retiree benefits. There was also a small gain due to actual experience compared to our assumptions, and that includes experience relating to retirement, mortality, termination, and disabilities. So all of this combined experience during the year results in an unfunded liability of $361 million as of July 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. So this slide has a similar reconciliation, but for the board contribution and the funded ratio, again, based on the actuarial value of assets. So the expected board contribution for fiscal year 2024 was 3.64%, but mainly due to the unfavorable asset experience and higher than expected cost of living adjustments, there was an additional increase of 0.13%, resulting in a board contribution of 3.77% of pay for fiscal year 2024. The funded ratio on an actuarial value basis was expected to increase from 85.9% to 87%. But again, due to experience during the year, the funded ratio actually decreased to 85.8%. And keep in mind, this is all based on the actuarial value of assets, and deferred asset losses will also be recognized over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the historical and projected funded position of the plan and the board contribution rates. The blue bars represent the contribution requirement as a percentage of pay each year. And as you can see, the contribution requirement continues to mostly increase over the next 4 years as those deferred losses from this year's asset experience are realized. The red line is the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets, and the blue line represents the funded ratio based on the market value of assets. The funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets continues to decrease over the next few years as the deferred asset losses are recognized, while the funded ratio based on the market value of assets steadily increases over the next few years, assuming the plan assets earn the investment return assumption of 6.75%. Eventually, the blue and red lines do converge to a funded ratio of 83.3% in 2026 as the deferred losses are fully recognized. So it is important to note that these projections are based on a 6.75% investment return assumption, and they also assume that all of our other assumptions are realized as well. Slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to Amy to discuss the OPEB results.
Thank you, Cassie. I will be discussing the OPEB results, which is the other post-employment, other than pension benefit, actuarial valuation results. So next slide, please. We did incorporate some changes in the actuarial assumptions used for the OPEB valuation related to the assumed trend rates or the rate of increase assumed for the different benefits in each future year. So we do use separate trend rates or assumed increases for medical trend, for prescription drug trend, and we have different rates for pre-Medicare prescription drug trend and Medicare eligible prescription drug trend. So we did refresh those rates, and the rates have an initial lower rate for the first year and then going to a higher rate for 2024, which eventually grade down to an ultimate trend rate of 4.25% for each of those items. In addition to updating the trend rates, we did update the age-adjusted claims cost to reflect claims and enrollment experience through June 30th, 2022. And these were the starting point for our actuarial valuation results as of July 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. For the OPEB valuation, we have a similar summary of the actuarial valuation results. So at the top, we have a summary of the membership data. So we have our active members as of July 1, 2022, with assumptions on the percentage that will participate in the plan as employee or as retirees once they are retirement eligible. And then we have our current retirees and beneficiaries that are currently receiving OPEB benefits from the plan. There were increases in membership. The total membership increased by 221 members, with an increase of 94 active members and an increase of 127 retirees and beneficiaries. There was about a $27.6 million increase in the actuarial accrued liability, or the obligation to pay those benefits. As was discussed earlier in the presentation, for the OPEB valuation, we use a market value of assets. So this does not incorporate the effects of asset smoothing. Therefore, there was a decrease in the market value of assets of about 46 million, from 769 million down to 723 million. Because the actuarial accrued liabilities increased and the market value of assets decreased, when we look at the unfunded liability, which is the difference between the actuarial accrued liability and the asset value, there was an increase in the unfunded liability of about 74 million. The funded position, or funded ratio, which is the assets divided by the liabilities, also decreased from 42.5% measured as of July 1st, 2021 to 39.3% measured as of July 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. On the slide right here, we have the contribution requirement, again, similar to the pension valuation summary. So we have our component for the normal cost, which is the cost of benefits accruing during the year. Then we include a component to cover expected administrative expenses. We have our amortization payment. So that's kind of like the mortgage payment to go towards paying off that unfunded liability, calculated in accordance with the funding policy, which is to amortize that over a 30-year period. We get our total contribution requirement, which increased from 137.2 million from the last valuation, which is applicable to fiscal year 2023, to an increase of 142.9 million, which was calculated as of July 1st, 2022, and is applicable to fiscal year 2024. From there, we look at what the expected benefits will be for that upcoming or current year. We would consider those the pay-as-you-go benefits, and then the difference between the total contribution requirement and the expected benefit payments on a pay-as-you-go basis for that current year leaves us with the additional contribution requirement to be contributed to the OPEB trust in order to fund those OPEB benefits. When we look at the contribution requirements as a percent of payroll, the fiscal year 2023 total requirement was 7.42% of pay, and that has increased some to 7.57% of pay. And that is mainly attributable to the component for amortization of the unfunded liability because of the asset losses over the past year. Next slide, please. On the slide right here, we have our reconciliations. Again, similar to pension, we reconciled the county contribution requirement on the left and the funded status on the right. If all assumptions were realized, we would have expected that there would have been a slight increase in the county contribution requirement. There were a lot of offsetting components due to experience that resulted in an additional increase of 0.03% of pay to get us to the final contribution requirement for fiscal year 2024 of 7.57% of pay. When we look at the funded status, again, if all assumptions were realized, including an investment return assumption of 7.5% for the OPEB trust, we would have expected an increase up to 44% funded ratio for OPEB. However, due to experience and most significantly, the asset losses on the market value of assets, that decreased the funded ratio and really was the driving factor in the overall decrease in the funded ratio down to the 39.3%. Next slide, please. On this slide right here, we have a comparison of the contribution requirements and the funded ratio. So the bars represent historical contribution requirements and the actual contributions that were made. So for the last two bars, those are for upcoming years for fiscal year 2023 and 2024. Therefore, we just have the contribution requirements of the 137.2 million and the 142.9 million. And those actual amounts will be known after those fiscal years have been completed. For fiscal years 2022 and prior, we have the comparison of both the contribution requirement calculated in the actuarial valuation and what the actual contribution was. So you can see that the green bars are lower than the blue bars, which means that the actual contributions have been lower than those contribution requirements calculated in the actuarial valuation for each of those historical years. Then we do have the line that represents the funded ratio. So that's the ratio of the assets to the liabilities. So you can see that there was an increase from 2016 to 2021 in the funded ratio up to a high point of 42.5%. But because of the unfavorable experience, mainly due to investments this past year for fiscal year 2022, that funded ratio has dropped down to the 39.3%. Next slide, please. On this slide right here, we have a summary of the required contributions for the OPEB. So what we wanted to highlight here is that there has been a shortfall in the actual contributions compared to the contribution requirements calculated in the actuarial valuation under the funding policy. So if we focus on that top table in the fiscal year 2022 row, the two columns to the right, the actual contribution that was in excess of the current year pay-as-you-go benefit payments for the retirees was 26.5 million. That compares to the expected additional contribution calculated in the actuarial valuation of 73 million. So there was a shortfall of $48 million in that contribution to the OPEB trust as a result of lower contributions actually being made than calculated under the funding policy. And then if you look at the table on the bottom, you can see what those contributions to the trust should be for the upcoming years in order to be following that funding policy. So for fiscal year 2023, that contribution requirement to the trust above and beyond those current year retiree benefit payments would be 64 million. And for fiscal year 2024, that contribution to the trust above and beyond those current year benefit payments for retirees would be 62.3 million. And that concludes the GRS prepared remarks for the actuarial valuation. So we're happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to my colleagues first. Dr. Daka, any questions?
No, thank you.
Dr. Joftis.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Can we go to slide 17? I just need some help understanding this one a little bit. Thank you. So can you just help me understand this? What I'm seeing is that there's a requirement that we haven't been meeting. And again, I apologize for my naivete. This is kind of new to me, but can you just explain how have we not been funding the requirement? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I can jump in first. So pension, the board takes care of the board contributions, right? But OPEB, the county actually provides those contributions. So a lot of times, although the actuaries point to, what we should be putting in, it's sometimes a budget decision on what's actually available. So that's what's happened a few of the years with the county. Budgeted funds weren't available to do that full funding.
So are we not fulfilling contractual items then?
I wouldn't say it's contractual because although it's recommended, these are the recommended contributions. Just to give you an idea, there's many other school districts and governments that are nowhere near the percentage funded we are. So I don't know if we actually have an agreement to say that the fully funded contribution would be made by the county. So I don't know if it's contractual.
Okay.
But they do their best to meet what comes out of the actuaries' numbers.
And so can you just carry that out a little further? Because then on the, if you could go to the next slide, please. So it looks like, it's a little bit, if I'm looking at the top table going to 2022, it's a little bouncy up and down in terms of where we've been from 2017, but it looks like the overall trend is going up. I don't know what the question is, but how concerning is that?
From my perspective, relative, as I was saying, to other school districts, I think we're in good shape. One of the things that's noted there, that this agreement happened, I don't know, a few years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, there's $27.2 million that the county provides and considers that as part of the contribution. We've actually used that to handle PAYGO, to handle current year expenses. So that's one anomaly that that kind of puts us below, the actuarial contribution because of that. But in the long term, I think what we're seeing here too is from the horrible investment return that everybody suffered over the last year. If you look the year before, we were actually pretty high, and then on the pension side, from a market value, we're actually over 90%. So a lot of it's driven by investment return as well too. But I would say, to answer your question, not something to be concerned about in the short run. Obviously, if this trend continued in the long run, we'd kind of lose that gain that we had earned so far.
Okay, so can you just explain then? So does this mean that we're not meeting, whether it's contractual or not, but sort of we're not meeting certain obligations that we've made to our employees, or?
No, we have, and Phoebe can speak to this too, we have no problem with our PAYGO, with meeting our current pension and OPEB and retiree benefits. This is long-term. This is kind of way into the future.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can add a few comments here. So if you look at the movement of this table, really which caused the fluctuation in the expected contribution for the OPEB is due to the actual contribution from the county and also the deficiency from the county contribution.
So when you say from the county, so the county is funding
the OPEB.
And we are funding,
we are funding, MCPS are only funding right now for the pension plan of MCPS pension plan and also the state pension, part of it. As I understand. And also to your point, maybe I can start my presentation. I can give you some ideas behind the kind of building blocks of the asset and the liabilities.
Okay.
And in terms of the benefit payments to all the retirees, so that's a defined benefit. So that's regulated by the plan documents.
Right, okay.
But in terms of the contribution, that comes from MCPS contribution, employees contribution, and also the investment returns. So all the assets and liabilities, they all fluctuate each year.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I guess just one sort of overarching a question for me, just as maybe a point of clarification. So we're looking at as of July 1, 2022, so the closeout of fiscal year 23. And we're looking at a funded position of our pension fund, which is MCPS funded, of 85.8%, and a funded position in our other post-employment benefits fund, which is county funded, of 39.3%. And as, you know, maybe this is a question for the actuarials, but what is, and you've alluded to this a little bit, Mr. Riley, what is from a overall fiscal health risk management perspective, what is sort of acceptable as a funded position in these, and what is typical for school systems, public school systems?
That's a good question.
On the pension side, the funded ratio is pretty healthy, and we also like to really focus on the trend of the funded ratio, just not the absolute funded ratio itself. So there are always going to be setbacks after challenging investment years, but overall, if we're seeing a projected increase in the funded ratio, then we would consider that a healthy funded status. And we did see that on one of the slides that Cassie presented, that we had our projection of the current year and then projected into the future, assuming that the 6.75% is earned on a market value basis in each of the future years. On the OPEB side, there are many plans that don't even pre-fund their OPEB at all. So I think, although it is a much lower funded status than on the pension side, there are, different considerations to take into account when you're looking at the funded status of an OPEB plan versus the funded status of a pension plan. And for the most part, you're not going to see OPEB plans that have a funded status anywhere close to pension plans. So again, if there is pre-funding going on, then that will provide some additional bumps in the funded status. However, the less that's pre-funded, the slower the progress in that funded ratio. So I don't know if any of my GRS colleagues would like to add anything else to that.
I would just add, Amy, that the whole idea of pre-funding is, once the money's in the fund, you have the benefit of earning investment return. And all of that investment return actually saves you money in the long term, because you can use that investment return to reduce your contribution requirements in the future. So to the extent that you're very well funded in the pension, the goal would be to be 100%. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. As Amy said, though, I think you're at 86% funded on an actuarial basis. That's a very, good funding ratio, and your trend has been up. So we think, we're very comfortable with the pension side. On the OPEB side, as Amy said, again, the goal would be to be 100%, but most OPEB plans around the country are not funded to 100%. In fact, as Amy said, there are many that aren't funded at all, and you're really just paying the OPEB benefits, the claims, on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the fact that you're about 39% funded, that's very good in terms of OPEB funded ratios around the country. So yeah, we're very comfortable with the goals, with the funded ratios as they are. Could the OPEB plan be funded better by the county? Again, that's a county decision that has to do with the county, financials. And but the fact that you're funding it, that you're at 39%, is all good.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in my mind, and I could be totally wrong, but we've talked about this before, and about the contribution that the county has not made over 6 or 7 years. So they really don't like our system. They want us to go into their system. But it seems from what you're saying, if they would forward that money, they would make more interest on the money they do have. Okay. Well, we've got a new council.
True. Okay, just looking at my colleagues, any other questions? Mr. Riley, anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, I'm just going to pass it. There's another, thank you, GRS partners.
Thank you, GRS, very much.
There's another PowerPoint that Phoebe's going to go through to talk specifically about our pension and where we stand.
Okay, so we are moving on to agenda item 4.2, which is our year-end pension report.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Phoebe Kwan, Director of Investments. So I will provide an update on the MCPS Retirement System and Trust, which provides a pension benefit to MCPS retirees. So I have a presentation. Can you pull up the slides on the screen, please? Great, thank you. So moving on to this first slide. Next slide, please. First, I would like to provide an overview of the retirement savings options that offer to MCPS employees. So on the left-hand side, in the blue box, you see that all the employees, including the temporary employees, they can participate in the 403B and 457B plans. That's very similar to the 401K plans that you see in the private sector. And on the right-hand side, you see all the teachers and also the administrative personnel. They are automatically enrolled actually the teachers and the retirees and the administrative personnel who are hired on or after January 1st, 1980s, they are automatically enrolled into the core state pension plan. As you see in the gray box on the right-hand side. And you see in the middle two blue boxes, those are the MCPS pension plan. So all the employees, they are not part of the Maryland State pension plan. They receive the supplemental pension plan. They receive the core pension plan from MCPS pension plan. And all the employees, including those people enrolled into the MCPS state pension plan, they receive the supplemental pension plan of the MCPS pension. So in the mid-90s, the Board of Education adopted a trust agreement and also established the MCPS Retirement System Trust, really to hold and invest all the assets of MCPS pension plans. And our team's main responsibility is to assist this Board of Investment Trustees to implement their investment decisions and also to monitor the portfolio of the pension plan. And also we oversee all the administration of the 403B and 457B plans. So next slide, please. So let's turn into the investments of the MCPS Retirement System Trust. So the trustees, they are the fiduciaries to the MCPS pension plan, and they invest the assets prudently and solely in the interest of the plan participants and the beneficiaries. So there are two main objectives of the pension investments. The first is to pay the benefits when due, and second is to achieve the 6.75% actuarial rate of return. Last year, due to the decline of the long-term capital market assumptions, so this rate was actually lower from 7% to 6.75% based on the GRS and the trustees' recommendation. So with these targets and objectives in mind, the trustees, in conjunction with the external investment consultants and also the investment managers, they construct a portfolio that will maximize the risk-adjusted return and also to minimize the associated expenses of the pension plan. And the trustees' strategy to meet these objectives really is to maintain a bias towards a long-term performance. Through multiple economic cycles, both capital appreciation and also the income generation. So in order to mitigate the potential consequences from the volatility in the capital markets, as you see nowadays, the trustees are focused on reducing the risk through the asset allocation decisions, including the investment in the non-correlated investment strategies, and also by minimizing the costs incurred in managing the trust. So moving to the next slide. Let's start with a review on the key components of the pension. So here you see is a scale representing the balance between the assets and also the liability. On the right side, you see the primary components that drives our pension plan's liability. That's the negotiated payouts ratio, number of employees, life expectancies. And on the left side, what you see is the building blocks of our pension assets, MCPS and employees' contribution, and also the investment income, which the trustees have the greatest influence over. And moving to the next slide, you will see the numbers behind the building blocks of the pension assets. So in the fiscal 2022, the largest contribution came from the MCPS contribution, and followed by the employees' contribution. However, the last fiscal year is a very challenging year to all the investors and all the pension plans because of the rising interest rate, the inflation increase, and also the recession fears, which impact the global financial markets negatively. The MCPS pension trust suffered the loss as almost all the other pension plans, and the pension ended the fiscal 2022 with a balance of around $2 billion. Now I would like to review the pension trust investment strategies in the next slide. So I mentioned earlier that the trustees' goal is really to construct a portfolio with exposure to multiple investment strategies that will achieve the 6.75% rate of return. So this slide really illustrated the investment strategies currently in the portfolio, segmented into the roles that they are playing. So the left side of the slide represents the strategies that over time will produce higher returns for the portfolio. And the right side represents those strategies that, generally speaking, provide protection to the portfolio's value in the weaker economic environment. So the Board of Investment Trustees, they collaborate with the investment consultants and to really set these long-term asset allocation strategies and also define the targets for our pension portfolio. So where do we stand against these set asset allocation and the targets? So the next slide, you see the chart in the next slide really depicts what our long-term targets are for those strategies versus where we are today. So our pension trust is tilted towards the return-seeking portfolio, which you see in the chart, the global equities, the private equity, and also the real assets. That represent 58%, almost, 68%, almost 70% of our allocation targets. And it is the pension plan is currently underweighted in all the private markets asset classes, which require multi-year to achieve the targets. So approximately 70% of the portfolio are the primary exposure. That's in the global equity and also the core fixed income, which is investment grade bond. So and the majority of this bucket of the portfolio, they're in the passive investments, which means when the market experiencing great volatility, like the current state, and the performance of this primary exposure will trend with the market returns and impact the total fund performance. So 30% of the portfolio are the diversifying exposure, either to generate a return that's similar to what we would expect from the primary buckets, or to mitigate the risk by reducing the volatility in the portfolio. And essentially, what that means is looking for investments that have a very low kind of correlation to the broader equity and the bond markets. And this portfolio is invested across over 40 investments in the private markets, hedge fund, bank loans, and emerging markets debts. So moving to the next slide. Before we turn to the pension trust investment performance, I would like to provide a very quick update on the market performance in this slide. So the tables summarize the major public index performance in different time frames, including the year to date as of June and the fiscal year 2022. So the volatility continued to affect all the asset classes negatively. For fiscal 2022 and year to date as of June, almost all the major public asset classes, they incurred historical losses. And in the first half of the 2022, as you see in the YTD, that column, public equities returned over this period were the worst in the 50 years. For example, the S&P 500, the second line in the equity table, fell about 20% year to date, which has the worst start to a calendar year since the 1960s, and are likely to going to be in a bear market for this calendar year. The primary factors driving the decline in the market, the stock market, have been the same all year: increased inflation expectation, the rising interest rate, the Russian-Ukraine war, and also the COVID-induced shutdowns in China. So moving to the table at the bottom for the credits, the Bloomberg U.S. Aggregate Bond Index, that's the second line item of the bottom table, is actually the proxy for all the investment grade bond. So declined by almost 10% YTD. The AGG had its worst start to a calendar year since the inception. And an increase in the interest rate had a negative impact on the returns. And as we know that the Fed is most likely to increase the rate again in the coming month. So entering into the fourth quarter of 2022, the open question is whether we're going into a recession or a more severe contraction. We expect to see more volatility in the market, and we will see that more pressure on the pension trust investment returns. So moving to the next slide, we have seen how the market performed, and now let's take a look at the investment performance for fiscal year 2022. So the chart on this page shows the performance results as of June 30th, 2022, as compared to the policy benchmark and the allocation index. So the policy index is calculated by applying the benchmark index returns to the targeted allocation percentages by each asset classes. So that's where we want the portfolio to be. And the allocation index is calculated by applying the benchmark index returns to the actual allocation percentages for each asset class. So as I mentioned earlier, majority, almost 70% of the portfolio tracks the public market index return. So the total return for the 1 year is a negative 8.7%. However, it's this return is about 1% ahead of the policy benchmark and 2.7% ahead of the allocation benchmark, despite the market declines in a scale that we never seen before. So going to the next slide, the peer group analysis showing you here is how MCPS total fund return versus a universe, which comprise all the public funds constructed by our investment consultant, NEPC. So you see in this table down the bottom, the population moving from left to right for each of the time frame. For example, the 1 year return, 530. So there are 530 pension plans in this universe. It gives you a very broad perspective of what our peer groups are performing and where we are compared to our peer groups. So if you look over the 1 year period, our 8.7% loss ranked actually the first quartile of the universe. And you see there's a very wide kind of spread between the top and also the bottom percentile, which shows you that in a volatility like nowadays, you really see how different asset allocation is performing. And MCPS pension allocation is well positioned to weather the current market volatility. So moving on to the next slide. So since I took the position from last year, our division has led multiple projects and also took a lot of initiatives really in order to enhance the return and also to improve the operational efficiency. Through both the public equity and the fixed income had historical losses, but our private markets programs performed better. So our private equity portfolio just reached the allocation target, and the 1 year return is over 20% for the last fiscal year. And the board, the trustees approved a new mandate into the private infrastructure with an inflation hedge to further diversify our portfolio. We also issued an RFP and hired Makita Investment Group as our private markets consultant in order to further design and also to build the private markets portfolio, which is a return-seeking portfolio. In addition, we implemented the Russian and Belarusian divestment based upon trustees' decision, and also we developed an improved rebalancing policy, which provide more clear guidelines for us. So on the cost saving side, you see that we consolidate all the passive index investments in the equity and also the fixed income, which generate about 380,000 savings annually. And also we're undergoing a custodian and benefit payment processor transition, which potentially could provide us about 1.3 million savings annually. And with all these savings, that represent about over 10% of our total pension trust expenses. So we are also contemplating an administrative expense policy to measure the allocation and monitor the expenses going forward. And we expanded our team from 4 to 6 people, really because of the assets and also the number of investments under management has grown dramatically, and we need a better coverage to manage the portfolio. So the last slide. So while the short-term environment is very unsteady, over the long term, we expect this difficult economic environment has created very strong buying opportunities for the investors. And at this point, at some point, the market will go up and the stock and the bond will move higher. So right now is a very unique economic moment that underscores a very diversified portfolio. So we will stay invested and also maintain a consistent and appropriate diversified exposure to the capital markets so that the short-term volatility will not cause the pension trust to alter its long-term strategic plan. And we will continue to structure a very simple and a low-cost and diversified portfolio to meet the long-term return expectation. And our seasoned investment staff, consultants, and also the trustees will monitor and adjust our portfolio asset allocation accordingly to ensure a safety and growth of the pension assets for the years to come. So in addition, and we'll seek all the opportunities to enhance the internal control and also the governance structure of the pension trust to cut the administrative expenses during the economic downturn. And we hope the Board of Education will continue the efforts to improve the funded ratio of the pension plan, which is the largest contributor to our pension trust. That concludes my presentation today. Any questions or comments?
Dr. Jaka? No. Dr. Jakas?
Thank you. Thank you very much. One just very specific question and then one sort of broader statement.
Yeah.
So the two objectives that you highlighted, I'm wondering whether we want to consider as a third objective increased participation in the plan. Do we have a sense of the percentage of eligible potential members who are participating in the program?
So actually for MCPS pension plan, that's a mandatory pension plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all the full-time employees, they participate in the
great.
plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And then I was sort of debating whether I wanted to mention this, but since it's my last day, I might as well. There's pressure nationally to disinvest in Israel, and I just want to state as a outgoing member that I completely oppose that policy, and that I hope as a system that we won't sort of fall into this trend, I guess, in terms of disinvesting from Israel. I think we need to continue all investments as we are currently doing. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have, if you could just refresh the collective memory about our Board of Investment Trustees.
Yeah.
How many people sit on that board, and how we as a board appoint them?
Sure. So the Board of Trustees can have up to 11 members, and currently we have 9 members. And one of the member, Rob Riley, is the ex-official member to this board. And we have one retiree sitting on the board, and also one MCPS employee sitting on the board. And all the other remaining trustees are coming from outside, and they bring all the expertise in the financial markets, in the asset management, and the legal perspective. So it's a very diverse board members, and also they all contribute to different kind of expertise in terms of managing the pension trust portfolio.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that nobody sitting on that board is compensated.
No.
So
Yeah.
they do us a great service.
That's right. That's right. It's really a great.
For which we are very grateful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any other questions.
Great.
So, thank you. And I guess we are now moving on to item 5.1, the long-awaited results of our state legislative audit. And again, just to refresh the collective memory, since I believe 2012, I could be wrong about that, the state has mandated that every local education association, every school system, receive a state audit every 6 years. And this is MCPS's third of those audits. And it was looking at our system for the 21-22 school year, or FY '23. Right, yes.
Yes, through 22. And the first one was January 2009.
Okay.
And there's actually a PowerPoint as well for this presentation. Before I get started, we're going to go over some of the results, but I wanted to ask Gina Ripoli and Rick Johnstone from Directors in Erskine to join me to address some of the things that we're going to be doing as corrective action. So just as you mentioned, Ms. Harris, this is, next slide please, something that we're doing in accordance with Maryland Code, and it is done every 6 years. There are some of the smaller districts that actually had the opportunity to be exempt for 1 year because, as I'll mention, there is a administrative burden on the system to kind of get this data. So those small districts took advantage of that. But the objectives of this is to look at our procedures. It's mainly controls and a lot around accounting and safeguarding assets. And then are we providing for the efficient use of our financial resources? Next slide. So as I noted, they're looking at a lot of the areas in the Office of Finance, cash collections, purchasing, disbursement, but they're also looking at OHRD, and they're looking at information systems, our IT folks, transportation, and then other significant programs that we administer. And they're looking specifically at transactions, records, procedures, and controls that are in place. So to give you an idea, we actually got the letter for this one that we just completed right around this time 2 years ago. So it actually, unlike our annual audit, this audit was pretty extensive. By the time from soup to nuts, it took about 2 years to kind of get this accomplished. So the next slide gives a little summary of each of the 3 legislative audits that we went through. And not that we like to see, we don't like to see findings, but you can see that the recommendations actually went down 19, 16, 13. But as Dan Kelly mentioned when we first started this, like we look at recommendations as an opportunity for improvement, and just so we do here as well too. So I just wanted to bring attention, the September 22 ones there was a procurement finding, there was a HR and payroll finding, there was 2 related to facilities, other financial controls. The information technology, you'll see there's 6 recommendations there. Something new that they did this year, OLA, is they redacted them from what's online. And just as a preface, none of the things that they found, they found things in all of these areas where we could beef up our controls, not necessarily something that shot out and said, wow, we've been doing this wrong for all these years. They're mainly just recommendations to improve controls. So although the information technology recommendations are redacted, there's really nothing too alarming there, just to give you a little preface on that. And then there was a transportation finding, plus there was a little narrative in the legislative audit regarding transportation that we'll discuss as well, too. So next slide. So this is a summary of the non-IT recommendations. So the first one I wanted to talk about was one, they recommended that we perform independent reviews of HR and payroll changes on a more frequent basis. So they actually considered this one a repeat finding. So 6 years ago, they looked at what are we doing to monitor changes that are made in personnel payroll files, and what are we doing to prevent any inaccuracies. So what we decided was we use internal control currently before this audit came up, and we'll pick a sample of 8. Gina Rapoli will provide a report to internal control. They'll pick a sample of 8, and then they'll look, does anything not look right in pay increases or other things that might happen in that file. We haven't found anything at that time. So when they came back, we said, hey, we've been doing this for the last 6 years. And they said, well, that's good, but we want more. So being, as you know, that payroll and benefits are 90% of our budget, we kind of agree with this. So a lot of there's interaction between when we get a new employee, OHRD will put them in the system. That file will go to Erskine, and we do a review of that. But what they said, they wanted to beef up more. So along the lines with the previous finding, what they want us to do is, and Gina, you can help me on this, but I think they're looking for us anything above a $10,000 increase, and we're doing it more often. So we're doing it every payroll now. The benefit is that we do have reporting coming out of the new system. So Gina's able to kind of accomplish this, provide to internal audit. So we're still using 2 sets of eyes, but she's working with these new reports that we can kind of get that data. Of course, it is, somebody's got to do it, but we feel the benefit here outweighs the cost of this. I don't know if you want to add anything that we discussed.
Good afternoon. I'm Gina Rapoli. I am the director of the Employee and Retired Service Center. Mr. Riley explained that we have been doing a quarterly review of all our transactions with internal audit. After this finding, we had met and we had discussed that we were going to do it bi-weekly now. We're setting up the data. We're doing it in our current system. As you know, we're implementing a new HCM in fiscal year 2024. But right now, what we're going to be doing is reporting a collection of all the transactions that we have, and that's going to be sent over to internal audit for her to pick up about 25 transactions and determine what has occurred. It could be FDA changes, it could be salary changes, etc. In addition, we are creating a second report that identifies anyone who has had an increase of $10,000 or more from one pay period to the next. She's going to review all of those records as well. The third report that we're going to be working on is for new hires. Any new hire that has received an offer letter from OHRD, that information is sent over to ERC, and we're the final set of eyes that's submitted to the system. So once that is submitted, a report is going to be created so we can compare it back to what it was sent from HR. So there's kind of like a full cycle of a second set of eyes looking at the data that is included.
Thank you, Gina. So moving on to the next 2, I didn't want to speak too much about these because, as I mentioned, they didn't really find anything that we were doing wrong. They were just saying that, in these situations, we couldn't provide backup for some of the controls that we had in place. So for the one about construction, I think that one, we were saying that we were doing daily inspections at construction sites, but in actuality, if there's nothing to be, no changes, we don't necessarily do that. So we were looking at ways that we can kind of modify our process or procedure to kind of do what we actually do, which is nothing wrong with that, but just to make the policy match what we're doing. The other one is development of a MOU with our educational foundation. So this is something that's come up over the years. We are, I'd say, a week or 2 away from getting that finalized. So that was that one. And then the next one is improving monitoring of third-party healthcare claims processing services. So I'm going to let Rick speak to this one. They're talking about claims audits. And I don't know if you can give some history or where we're at or what we're doing with Cigna with the new contract.
Sure. Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Rick Johnstone, Director of Benefits. So a couple of years ago, the thought was to build in to the contracts that we have with our vendors a audit basis. We had done a claims audit on our prescription plan, I guess about 8 years ago. It was sort of pressed by the county at the time. We did so even though most claims are auto-adjudicated, meaning they go through the system automatically. There's no touch to it by humans. Had spent about $60,000 for that audit and recouped about $600. So it wasn't necessarily a recoupment of mismanaged claims. It is basically to ensure that the vendors are adhering to our plan design and our reimbursement schedules. And so what we have done over the last number of years, if we've gone out to bid through RFPs, is to build into the RFP process a set amount for audits on claims. And we are in the middle of a claim audit right now with Caremark, which is our prescription plan. And we are building into the medical RFP, which is going to be moving to Cigna as of January 1, the same protocols, so that we'll be able to, after a year's period of time, be able to go through the contract and have that fund the actual audit of the plans and look at that. We're not looking at dollars as far as any huge recoupment. It is basically just ensuring that the plans are abiding by our co-pays, our plan design, and the like to make sure that we're running the way we're supposed to.
Thank you, Rick. And for the last one, if you guys don't mind, can you switch with Angela? Angela McIntosh Davis is our Director of Procurement, and she's going to speak to the last audit recommendation, which is improving our procurement processes specifically related to ICPAs, or Intergovernmental Cooperative Purchasing Agreements, or piggyback agreements in department-specific areas such as transportation. Angela, I don't know if you recall the one that they actually pulled in the report, but if you can kind of just share something we're doing to improve that process.
Sure. Good afternoon. So one of the main opportunities that we have to improve in this area is to create a checklist. And it's basically a list to be sure that we have incorporated all of the best practices in these cooperative agreements when we are bridging or a contract or piggybacking. These contracts that we have all of the documentation that proves that it was competed, it was advertised, it is a best value for us to utilize that method in lieu of competing for those services on our own. So the checklist is very comprehensive. It has a number of areas that we look into. We also reach out to the office or the agency or entity that we are looking to bridge. So that's the main thing.
Thanks, Landra. And that's a commitment that we're making going forward. The other area that I wanted to speak about was in that report, they reference incidents that occurred in the transportation department over a year ago, mainly focused on our P-card processes. So as I mentioned, we look at these as a way to improve our processes. So P-card actually affects, or we utilize procurement as well as controller's office. I have Susan Chen up there too. A lot of these things, we address these issues interdepartmentally because we want these corrective actions and we want these controls in place. So we have different sets of eyes looking at these. So one of the things that some of the improvements that we're specifically making, we are going to, in addition to mandated training, we're going to have refresher training during the year. And if it's not completed by schedule, we are going to suspend cards as a measure to improve that control. And we are going to lower, we already have lowered annual and per purchase limits. These are things that came out of work group that we had using a lot of the different departments in the system. We're going to have document imaging mandated, and this is something that we can do in our new system too. And another one of the benefits of the new system for record keeping on each cardholder account, and we're going to increase the frequency of desk audit review processes. So these are all things that we are in place actually right now in response to some of those issues that came up. I don't know if there's any, did you have anything there that I missed or?
I don't think, did you mention that we did do we retrained Department of Transportation. We've also been retraining the Department of Maintenance and Operations. These are just very large departments who utilize P-cards on a regular basis for the most part, and they may have use for areas that exceed some of the limits. They're not within the regular $500, $1,500 limit because of what they're purchasing. A one-time purchase may exceed that small $500 threshold, so we're making sure that they understand that when they're purchasing with those limits, they are purchasing items on contract, on bid, even though they're using the P card for the quicker purchase if a need exists, especially in an emergency basis. I think that was it.
Thanks, Angela. And as you alluded to, we want to improve our communications too. So we have a pretty robust financial manual. What we also want to do is make sure that everybody knows what those rules are. So constant communication to make sure that there's nobody can say, oh, I didn't know that, right? That's one of the things we want to accomplish as well too. So that's what we had for the legislative audit. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yes, I start with my colleagues. Dr. Daka, any questions? Dr. Jopton?
Thank you.
I would just say, could you clarify, and I know, this has been in the media, our issues with the transportation department. Just explain quickly about the P cards and the extent of their use and the reason for their use inside MCPS.
Sure. So the P cards are utilized in most of our schools, some of our offices, like I said, DOT and Department of Maintenance and Operation utilizes them, and therefore, if a need exists immediately, that they need to go out and make a purchase or a purchase. Some places don't accept purchase orders. So if there's a need for the use of a credit card, quote unquote. So that's usually when we need it or when it's used. In the schools themselves, I find that they're used for small micro purchases, things that are not on bid, something sort of out of the ordinary ad hoc with it, but it's used online purchases and where a purchase order isn't utilized.
And are P cards issued to individuals or to departments or offices or?
So at the school level, it is an individual's name is on the card, but it's for a specific account. So schools have, I think, up to 3 types of accounts, which is the funding source. And then in the offices, the same thing. We don't, we have the fiscal person is usually issued the actual card under the account that is specific to that office.
Okay. Okay. And, Mr. Riley, if you would just, so you mentioned that a new practice with the state auditors was kind of redacting out recommendations related to IT systems. Just a quick explanation for why they're doing that and why that's important.
Yeah, they felt that, and I don't know if there were any incidences of this, but they felt that having them out there in the public kind of puts ideas in bad players' heads. We don't want to put anything out there to show any vulnerabilities. We know what. We have the actual report, so we know where we can make improvements, but we don't want to let the general public know that anybody that's looking to do something wrong.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Ready to move on now to item, 5.2, talking about the CIP, and I think Mr. Adams is jumping down here to join us, and Ms. Kermijas.
So thank you again for the opportunity to present a few updates on our CIP, but we also really want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the state aid funding formulas as we've talked about it as a whole board throughout the CIP process. So Ms. Karamiyas is here today to walk us through, but I would just start by saying we actually have a couple paths of state funding currently. We have the traditional path, which again we'll walk you through. We also have Built to Learn. Built to Learn has been a new model that has been created by our legislators across the state. And one thing that I would say about that is that there's actually not a process to date that we could present. You know, we've been navigating this with the IAC teams as well as partnerships with other LEAs. But currently we are taking advantage of more Built to Learn funds than any other LEA across the state. So we're really fortunate about that. But once we have a formal process that comes through either the Stadium Authority, Maryland Stadium Authority, or the IAC, we'll certainly present sort of the same process type of element that we will show you today. But if we can, move on to the next slide. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll try to move quickly through. But again, just from an overall agenda, give you the background on the state aid process, a few of the process overview steps, what we have to do internally in order to maximize our funding. Adrian will walk us through the factors that will impact whether or not we receive our full 50% match. And then just talk through steps around what are the strategies that we've implemented over the past couple of years to maximize. I would also just flag that there was a OLO report at the county level that really did a deep dive into state aid, from an MCPS perspective. So that was very informative. I think from their perspective, we definitely worked with them to help develop some of the strategies and other steps that are associated with maximizing state aid. But I think it did dispel a lot of myths that were out there in terms of what we are or what we are not doing from a public school system perspective. So I would always recommend folks to take a look at that if they would like some additional information beyond what we present today.
Do we have that OLO report on our website for easy access?
I do not know, but that's certainly, if we do not, something we can link up and make sure it's on the facility's website.
Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of background. The state superintendent has the authority to approve or disapprove any plan, anything that we put forth worth $350,000 or more. So that's sort of the threshold that it has to go through the state process. The IAC has the authority to adopt regulations containing requirements for site approval, plans, specifications for school buildings. So anything that goes through our capital budget, it goes through the IAC as part of their process as well. Next slide, please. So in 2018, the IAC adopted the Maryland Public School Educational Facility Sufficiency Standards. The standards establish the minimum, so the minimum amount or minimum levels for the physical conditions, capacity, and educational suitability of public school facilities. So we have this guideline that says what is the minimum we should be doing when we're doing either capital projects, additions, new schools. The scope is limited to spaces needed to support the educational programs and the curricula required by the Maryland State Board of Education in a manner sustainable within the operational budgets of the school system for staffing, maintenance, and full utilization of the facility. So in that regard, what they're saying is we're looking at the capital projects or the capital projects that we recommend, classroom spaces, all the spaces that go into our building should also take into account on the operating side as well. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows the process, and again, I know it's a little hard to see, but the state starts their process basically in October. We have to submit our state CIP request to the state the beginning of October. And as you know, the superintendent does not release their recommendation until the end of October. So there definitely is a sort of disconnect between when we request to the state and when we go through, both the superintendent and the board go through their process. The one thing to remember is that anything that is in our state CIP request must be previously approved by the council. Meaning, for example, if we put in front of the superintendent's recommendation has an appropriation request for construction funding in that end of October period, we cannot put that request into our October request to the state. It has to come from the previous. So the county council must approve, for example, construction funding in the previous May in order for us to put it into our October. So in that regard, we're also sort of late in the process. So again, as an example, we do have a number of projects. This CIP that are asking for additional money for construction based upon increases. Those are not reflected in the October. We have to wait for the county council to adopt it, and then I will have to amend the CIP in October, the state CIP in October, to reflect those increases. And this just goes through, again, I wanted to sort of have that process between state and local, but this is the actual state process. So you could see there is an early October submission. In November and December is when they review our CIP. They ask us a number of questions we get back to them on. The IAC staff provide a 75% recommendation, I believe, in early October. We do have our appeals hearing to the state. That's usually mid-October. They then go through, the IAC goes through their 90% recommendation and then 100% recommendation. The 90 is usually a February timeframe, and then the 100% is in May. In the past, we would not know the 100%, what they were going to allocate us until actually that May timeframe came about. Since Mr. Gorell started, even though he has now since left, and they will be replacing him with another executive director, and I believe that process is still ongoing. The 75% allocation that was submitted or that was released to all LEAs would actually also include the 100%, which was actually very helpful to LEAs. I hope that they continue that process. Things could be tweaked a little bit, but you kind of knew right away what the anticipated 100% would be, which is something that they didn't do in the past, which again, I think was very helpful for LEAs and hopefully will continue. So that's the process. Next slide, please. So the factors for state aid allocation, how it's determined, calculated, how we get our state aid. There are basically three criteria. It's the gross square foot baseline, which basically says, based upon a school with X amount of students, this is what the square footage should be. However, and I've said this, I think the last time we talked about this, it's like a layered cake. So that's sort of the first layer. The second layer is the adjacent school calculation, which is we have a school, let's say we're doing an addition, the schools that are adjacent to it, we have to show the capacity, the available seats of that school, not based upon our local capacity, but based upon the state-rated capacity, which is different. And so that's the second layer. And the existing square footage. Again, if we're doing an addition and we're putting on X square feet, if it goes beyond what the state says, then you wouldn't be eligible for additional square footage.
And I would just say that state-rated versus the our capacity calculations, the reason there's a difference is the state does not recognize programs such as class size reduction. They do not recognize some of the other class size reduction strategies that we've put forward as a school district. So in a lot of cases, their capacity is much higher than our capacity, which again leads to some confusion, but you know, and part of the challenges from a funding perspective.
Well, just as a quick clarifier, building on that, because this is something that we've been dealing with for years, it's the state-rated capacity versus the capacity that in the specs that we build to. The state not recognizing class size reduction initiatives and things like that, is that because we're the only LEA that has them?
Yes, that's a pretty complex response to that question, but it really boils down to, you know, if it's a program that an LEA chooses to fund, particularly from the operating side, they look at it from a perspective of equality across the state. So if Montgomery County Public Schools is able to fund a class size reduction type of program, and a Baltimore City may not be able to, that's why they don't recognize it from a state perspective. And there's ongoing litigation around this. You know, I think that's been ongoing for past decade or more, maybe 2 decades. But it really boils down to equity of funding between LEAs.
Thank you.
And also it's not just our class size reductions, it's also special ed, our special ed programs. The state does it all at 10-to-1, where we have a number of special ed programs, and depending on what the program is, there is a different capacity. So that sort of levels that, again, as Seth said, the playing field across the board, that all are calculated at 10-to-1. Next slide, please. So this is the sort of just the definition or summary of what the gross square foot baseline is. The total gross square foot baseline determines state funding participation and based on traditional practices and facility space allocation. So it is sort of that, again, sort of that very base, the minimum needed to have a school. It's intended to support all spaces required to deliver the program required by the state of Maryland. It's intended to encourage multiple use of spaces and other utilization maximizing strategies to reduce facility size and long-term cost of ownership. So an example of this, when the state is looking at spaces, for example, an elementary school, where we know kids don't move around classes, they have their own classroom. We also have art and music as spaces that we don't put into capacity because a grade goes in, a grade goes out. It's not part of our capacity. They did look at those spaces, see how utilized those spaces are, and whether those spaces could be utilized for other things during the day when not utilized for those spaces. So it is really looking at and diving into how you can maximize your building. A school system can challenge the gross square foot baseline on a case-by-case basis through an application for consideration by the IAC. The school system would need to provide sufficient information so that their staff can analyze those proposed spaces and use on a program-by-program basis. We have done that in the past. We haven't done it formally, but in some cases we have done it informally to try to get a sense of whether or not some of our spaces would be counted or that gross square foot baseline could be changed. Next slide, please. I mean, here's just an example of this. This is their calculations for elementary, middle, and high. So you can see for an elementary school, that's about 600 students. The baseline gross square foot per student would be about 120. So you could see there that would be a 600 capacity school at about 72,000 square feet. I just highlighted a middle school of 1050, and you could see it's 133 square feet per student, and that comes out to about 133,000 square feet. And at a high school, that would be a high school of about 2,000 students. Actually, it's 2050. It's 151 square feet per student at about 309,000 square feet. And those are the guidelines that they have. So for example, if it's a class size reduction school of 600 students, that square footage is going to be higher. Middle schools and high schools, the state rated capacity versus the local is not as drastically different as elementary schools, especially in elementary school that's a class size reduction school.
The one key difference, particularly at the secondary schools, middle and high, is as we begin to designate more of our middle schools as Title I schools, our square footage does significantly change because of the supports and other aspects of those buildings. So we are seeing some discrepancies on some of our newer schools that are seeing these recent Title I designations.
So just a direct follow-up to that. So, but the state would recognize Title I designation as necessitating certain.
Absolutely not. No. So they just look at it purely from what you see here is 600 students, and you're eligible for 120 square feet per student, regardless of designations, programs, or other elements of that building. Obviously, some of the blueprint for Maryland's future were really challenging this type of calculation, but as it stands today, there is no accounting for, some of these building nuances or program nuances that do result in needs for greater square footage.
And the only caveat I just want to say to that is that you do, again, as the previous slide said, you do have an opportunity to go to the state and argue and say, well, this is a Title I school, these are the additional spaces. Conversations that we've had about, in the past about other schools where our square foot is larger than what their designation is, it is a conversation about, well, maybe you can build this instead of that or use this for that. There is no requirement of what spaces we have to build, classrooms, art rooms, science labs, but there is a baseline for the square footage. So within that square footage, we could build what we want, but it falls within that square footage. Next slide. So again, the standard classrooms that we have, and actually we have made them in some cases even smaller to try to sort of fit within the state guidelines, as well as when we're looking at the significant increases in construction costs also. But typically, our standard classroom is about 1,000 square feet, 900 square feet of the interior space. The 1,000 square feet includes, of course, walls and infrastructure. This applies across all levels. Elementary school gyms are approximately 4,000 square feet. The cafeteria is about 4,000 square feet. So we just wanted to give some examples to sort of contextualize what we're talking about. So Snowden Farm, for example, opened up in 2019. It was 84,000 square feet. It had a capacity for 774 students. The total build was 92,366 square feet. So that was an increase of, or a difference of, between what we built and what the state would allow of 8,000 square feet. Meeting the state approved gross square footage would mean that we would have to have reduced that school by 8 classrooms or 4 classrooms and a gymnasium in order to get to that baseline square foot number. And again, just examples. Brown Station Elementary School, which is a class size reduction school, again, because of the capacity would be a gross square foot baseline of 84,000 square feet. We opened it in 2017. It was a total of 113,998 square feet, which also included a daycare and a linkages to learning, which is about 29,000 square feet difference than the state would allow. And that would be approximately 13 relocatables would need to have gone there if we went with the state's approved gross square footage. Next slide. So those are 2 elementary schools. Tilden Middle School, we opened it in September 2020 at 156,000 gross square feet for the state's baseline. It was a capacity for 1,216, and we built it at 168,804 square feet, which is a difference of 12,000 square feet. And finally, Wheaton High School, their gross square foot baseline is 330,000 square feet. We opened in 2016 for about 2,200 students, and our square footage when we built it was 373,825 square feet for about a difference of 43,000 square feet. And you can see that additional 43,000 square feet represents 22 teaching stations that would not have been built. And as you may know, Wheaton High School is about, I think, 400 or so students over capacity right now. Next slide, please. So this is sort of that second layer. So the first layer is the gross square foot baseline. The second layer is adjacent school calculation. And we have had numerous conversations about this over the years. So as part of our state CIP, we have to submit a form, and the form includes many different things, but one of the things it does include is this adjacent calculation form. And what I'm showing as the example is, the school that is being requested, and it is on that first line, and you can see the school based upon the state rated capacity, and they asked for the last year of our enrollment projections. That school is about 50 seats over, and I believe this was a class size reduction school. The bullets above say it's class size reduction school, Anticipated enrollment, 388 students. And so the first line, again, is that requested school. I just gave examples, so I said school A, B, C, et cetera. And you can see, based upon the state rated capacity and the last year of enrollment, what either the available seats are or what it is over projected, those adjacent schools. But the bottom line is you can see that total, and the total says basically there are 98 seats available at the end of the 6 years if you total up all of those schools. And so what the state does is they take that away from us. So they say, well, you have 98 seats available, even though in one school there's only 17 seats available, and in another school there is 13 seats available. And to do a boundary study or even consider that would not make any sense. And so they do deduct those 98 seats from what we are asking, basically saying you don't need a school of X, you need a school of X minus those 98 seats.
And so with this particular one, we did have strong representation. Representative McIntosh did put forth legislation that would help us in this situation. Again, we're not going to do a boundary study for 17 students at a school. That just would be extremely difficult. So she has worked with other colleagues to make adjustments in this one, but it is still something that we have to look at for every school and is very impactful to funding formulas.
And the adjustment, just to piggyback on what Seth said, the adjustment that we were looking for was for each school, adjacent school, that if it's 15%, I think it was 15% or higher or lower, that whatever available seats were, if they were 15% or less, they wouldn't be counted. At the end of the day, the legislation, the way the legislation was approved, it was all the schools put together. That 15% counted at the end. So it gives less flexibility for us. We would have preferred it being school by school. It is now total. So there is a little, there was a little understanding that moving students around or using that available capacity sort of against us didn't make sense, but it didn't, the approved legislation, we would have preferred it to go a little further to help us out a little bit more. But this is basically what that adjacent school calculation is. Next slide, please. And the last one, the last sort of layer to the cake is the square footage of an existing school. And this comes into play when we're doing additions. So in this case, this was a class size reduction school with 10 relocatable classrooms and an approximate enrollment of 600 students. The existing square footage of the building was 72,000 square feet. Based upon what would be allowed by the state, and you could see that calculation here, the state would only allow 66,000 square feet. Based upon, again, looking at the gross square foot baseline, looking at adjacent schools, and then looking at the existing square footage. So in this case, the state would not allow or would not fund an addition at all. Even though the school has 10 relocatable classrooms, because it is a class size reduction school, and not recognizing that class size reduction, if we didn't go ahead and fund it, it would have not been funded because the only allowable square footage was 66,000. That's how big the building should have been, and we already had a building of 72,000 square feet. Next slide, please. So in general, for MCPS, increasing the proportion of state aid per project would require a couple of different things if we want to look at this a little differently. Require building smaller schools with fewer amenities and less ability to support community use and spaces for support services. So a community school, items like that. Throughout the years, MCPS has made extensive investments in programmatic approaches and interventions and in the facility improvements needed to align with the support of our programs. So we always say that facilities doesn't drive programs, programs drive facilities. We do what our program folks tell us they need to support their students and staff. Historically, local funding has made this approach possible. State aid formulas are not designed to account for or to financially support some of our program priorities. Next slide. In order to maximize state funding per project, we would have to meet the gross square foot baseline. So that's the very first thing. It's the first layer of the cake. So if the state says that a building should only be X, that's what we should be building to if we want to maximize the state funding. We need to adjust MCPS definitions of capacity and adjacent capacity in order to align with the state's enrollment calculation. This would require more frequent boundary changes for smaller groups of students or increased use of relocatable classrooms. Those are those two options if the state says that our square footage would be higher than what theirs is. If the square footage of the existing building is larger than the state formula, which was that last example, consider other solutions such as relocatable classrooms or a boundary study. You just maintain those relocatables at that school. Next slide. I think that's it.
I don't know, other school systems are not complaining about this square footage thing that the state does?
So I hope we're not coming across as complaining, but I mean, that's, well, we do have, robust partnerships with other LEAs to work with, the state delegation. So that's not just a Montgomery County delegation or a Baltimore County delegation. We are looking at it from a perspective of how do we support one another, because we do know Montgomery County is very different than a Garrett County. It's very different than a Cecil County, and just trying to make sure that there's a process that works equitable for all is what we've been really partnering together to figure out.
Yeah, we are slightly different because people come here to have our programs, and our programs are what we're talking about, needing the extra space. And even some of us don't understand if a school has space, but we don't look at the programs, then we think, oh, we can shift some kids in there. Why don't we do that? Well, if you have a PEP program, you have like 4 or 5 kids in each classroom. So if you don't look at the program, you can't make any sense out of it at all. Does the blueprint have anything in it about building schools? I mean, any leeway in there? I mean, I don't remember seeing that, but you would know.
Yeah, we have historically always built pre-K classrooms and obviously supported, this expansion of special education. I believe from a blueprint standpoint, they are starting to acknowledge some of that, but it is still a little ways off in terms of translating into additional funding for capital projects.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, I mean, this is an issue that we've been dealing with, I mean, ever since I started, advocating on CIP issues in 2008. But I know we've had some good meetings over the past year, really with our delegation and county partners, talking about the fact that a lot of the ways that MCPS builds schools are actually evidence-based best practices to serve students well. And working with the state to acknowledge that we are building the kind of schools that we need to serve the population of students that we serve. And so I thought we are making some headway. What do you?
No, I do believe there's headway across the state. I think if anything, from a blueprint standpoint, it will start to acknowledge the operating side of some of the calculations, right? Far too often we focused on, are you getting enough for capital construction? And the conversation hasn't necessarily been around, like a different LEA maybe not funding a class size reduction program or not doing something from a Title I or from a special education perspective. So as that becomes more sort of evident, the operating budgets, I do believe, will be viewed very similarly as the capital budgets have been in the past, so that it will help justify the funding for these types of improvements and help some of these other LEAs fund from an operating perspective some of the critical functions that we've seen as successful as well.
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, but it seems to me that one of the major components of the blueprint is the implementation and accountability board, and holding all 24 LEAs accountable to, appropriately using the funding to achieve the goals of the blueprint. And if you're building schools that don't let you achieve those goals, that's a real opportunity to really engage in that conversation at a much deeper level. Anyway, okay, thank you very much. And now moving on, item 6.1, just a quick update on the changeover from Care First to Cigna, which is effective January 1, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll be quick, but can I grab Gina, Rick? So we did a lot of work on healthcare, or EBP, with this committee, right? We talked about the RFP process. We talked about rate setting, but we wanted to give you an update on open enrollment and our move to Cigna. So, Rick, you have some data points that you can speak to, right?
Sure. Thank you. We have concluded open enrollment. It's a very busy 4-week period for us that generally starts around May as far as the planning for communication and the like. During those 4 weeks, the call center that we have at Erskine are fielding hundreds of phone calls a day, hundreds of emails a day, and they address a lot of them. If they can't, they then bump it up to my team. Rob had asked for some updates from open enrollment, which we have got here for you. Just to give you an idea of the volume that we deal with. During open enrollment, we had a little over 8,000 employees go into our online system and affect some type of change, whether that is just to reaffirm what they have, which they don't have to do, it stays pat, and we're going to move people from the Care First type plan they have automatically to a Cigna type plan, so HMO to HMO, POS to POS. But there are people who elect FSAs because that's required every year. And our numbers there were actually pretty strong. We had about a little over 4,400 employees who elected a medical flexible spending account. So that's to assist with co-pays and out-of-pocket expenses for glasses and the like. And we had just under 1,000 that elected a dependent care FSA, which is for daycare expenses for kids. Another thing that is I'm very proud of is our wellness programs, which have won a lot of awards locally and nationally. And on that, we had a lot of activity from our active population, the employees. We have 3 areas that employees can address. 2 of the 3 give them credit, so that's the most you can earn. But those 3 areas are a biometric exam, which is your annual physical, for lack of a better term. We want people to go out and know their numbers, blood pressure and the like. And we had a little over 1,200 employees who did that. We have an HRA, which is the health risk assessment. So that's where you go online to the medical plan. You answer about 40 questions. So how much exercise you get, do you know your numbers, do you eat lots of green leafy vegetables and the like. We had a little over 5,000 employees that completed that. And then during COVID, we wanted an alternative for the biometric exam because A, you couldn't get to your doctors unless it was a emergent or urgent issue, and a lot of people weren't comfortable with that. So we did another online program where it was a biometric alternative, where you were sort of answering questions for yourself about your health care, and similar to an HRA, and we had almost 9,000 employees complete that. So all in all, out of a potential of about 40,000 hits that we could have had, we had 15,000. So about a 37% participation, which is outstanding for wellness programs. We also do this for retirees. Not quite as active there, but we had about 850 that did the biometric, so your annual physical, about 725 that did the HRA, and another 360 that did the online biometrics, so about just under 2,000 retirees that participated in that. So all in all, we felt that, we've got a good representation of our population. It's very active, and we receive a lot of good feedback for that. That's in addition to restarting our on-site biometric exams. So if employees or retirees want to, they can come over to 45 West Goody, go back into the Maple Room. We set up 4 or 5 nursing stations that are private, and you can get a blood stick so you can get your cholesterol and your diabetes, your height and weight, and also your blood pressure. And it takes about 15 minutes. There's no charge for the employee or retiree. They can come in, get it done, they get their numbers, and they go on their way. Want to stress again that my team does not get those results. We're not interested in what your height and weight and blood pressure is your information, and we couldn't handle it anyway. There's too many people that are doing it, but that is private information that's kept between the health plan and the employer retiree. We just find out, did Gina do both of those activities to get the credit, or did she only do one? And so we plug those into the rates for the upcoming year. So those are results from our open enrollment. We are ready for the rollout with Cigna, that transition for January 1. We've been working with them over the past 3 to 4 months for that transition on the files that go to them. The communications obviously was already locked up that we put out to our employees and retirees. And we've been fielding the standard questions. We've been expanding our frequently asked questions that we've had on board. A lot of misinformation that people have, which we understand. There's some angst with any type of change, and so we want to get in front of that and assist employees and retirees for that. And so I think our maybe 10 or 12 questions that we had in the beginning is now maybe up to about 40, which is okay, but that's from feedback that we've been getting through emails and phone calls from our population. So that's about it.
Yeah, good. And I appreciate the evolution of that process as we looked through this committee and through the regular board meetings to dig through some of the misinformation and the misconceptions, and so very much appreciate that.
Before you go, I think it would, you were finished, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Before you go, I think it might be a good idea to explain to our staff and to the community as to why we change systems from, we're changing now to Cigna. People need to know that there is a good reason for this.
Sure. Every 4 to 6 years, we're required to go out to bid, an RFP process that goes out to the marketplace to check the pricing and the programs and any advancements that have occurred over the past contract term. And so this past RFP that went out, we went out to bid, received bids from various vendors. We have an evaluation process that is preset, so that's gone out with the RFP that lets the vendors know what that is. On the technical side includes items like, your network, the programs for care management and healthcare management that they have, any improvements upon their programs that they may have instituted over the past 4 or 5 years. And then also there's a financial component to that, what it will cost the actual organization for that change. As we went through that process this past time, we went through that evaluation through my staff and with our association partners. They were reviewing it as well. And the scoring process came out that at this time around that Cigna was the winner on that process. And it was a fair spread between the first and second place, so it was not a close comparison. There are some advantages that we realized as well. The pricing was one of them. We're looking the first year for anywhere between about a $10 and $11 million savings by this. A lot of that is from the administrative fees that MCPS pays, in addition to the claims. The claims were pretty close with Care First, but the administrative fees were a big savings. I want to stress that we realize half of that amount because benefit plan years are calendar year, whereas our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. So we'll realize about $5 million of that savings in our current fiscal year coming up. And so that's a positive. But there was an advantage too that we were realizing, which I think is going to be greatly appreciated by employees and retirees, and that is that Cigna has a 24/7 customer service operation. So instead of trying to make sure you make that phone call before 5 o'clock, you're finishing your work day and you got to rush, or you're going to do it during your lunch hour, and make sure you get that phone call in on whether it's a claim or trying to locate a new doctor. You can go home, have dinner, and give them a call at 8 o'clock if you want. If you want, you can give them a call on Saturday or Sunday. And that, I think, is going to be a great benefit. Obviously, a bigger one for active employees because they're still working as opposed to retirees. But again, to be able to call at any time that you see fit, I think is going to be a great advantage to our population for their care and support. Because when you've got an issue, you want to have it addressed. And this is going to give that positive reinforcement for our population. So there were a number of scoring issues, pricing, and support that we saw. And so that determination was made, again, supported with the associations, presented to the board, and so we moved forward with that.
I just wanted to add on quick too. So we talked before about the sustainability and the health of our pension fund and the OPEB fund. So this is our active employee benefit fund. So this is one of the areas where this move kind of did save, because we've let everybody know that we could be in trouble over the next couple of years. So this is righting us to some extent.
Thank you, Mr. Johnstone and Mr. Riley.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on, getting to the end now. A quick update on our sustainability work. And I see Mr. Adams and Ms. Arate joining us.
So good afternoon. Thank you for having us talk to you about the updates that we're working on. I'm going to talk about the continuing expansion of our sustainability initiatives as a result of the policy that was passed this past June. I have 3 primary areas to focus on this morning: how we're nurturing students and staff and individual cultures in their buildings, how we're engaging both students and staff as leaders, and a little bit of commentary on what we're continuing to work on in our infrastructure. In terms of culture in the buildings, the biggest focus on that is promoting the Green School program. As you may recall, our policy stated that we wanted to increase that. We have a record number of schools that we're supporting this year. There are 40 schools that need to be recertified this year. So we've got to think about different ways we can do this and make this happen. So some of the ideas that we are pursuing right now is, number 1, engaging high school students as leaders. We've demonstrated in the past that high school students can actually create this entire process and to do it all by themselves with a little bit of staff support. So we're working on increasing that base of students that are available to help at the high school level. We're also working with PTAs and a PTA subcommittee to provide leadership there, because again, we can't do everything all ourselves. It's a community effort, so everything we can do to expand the people working on this, the better. We are in the process of rolling out a stipend for our school-based staff who'll be doing this very, very important work as a small token of appreciation for the amount of work that it takes to make this Green School certification happen. And we're also looking at potential for engaging retired teachers to possibly help with that. In terms of engaging our students and staff as leaders, obviously communication is incredibly important. So we're continuing the symposium series that we started a couple years ago. This fall, our symposium will be on December 7th. It will be a webinar-based one again, and it will be about the electric school bus program. As in previous symposiums, we are engaging student leaders to help us plan for the program, market the program, and even make the program happen. So we're having weekly meetings at this point with those students to really create a program that they're interested in, not just something we're interested in, but what is it that they want to hear about, and how can we get more people involved in that. I would be remiss if I did not remind everyone that tomorrow is America Recycles Day, and for our first ever staff event that we're going to be having tomorrow over at 45 Goody, where we're trying to get staff, central services staff, more involved in the various streams of recycling. We are also participating in a student government meeting in December, and that's going to also involve some more education about the electric buses. And lastly, we're supporting students at both Kennedy and Poolesville High School. We've begun to learn more about some of the community partners that are out there, and the one that we're working with is called Student Global Ambassador Program, where the students learn a lot about climate change. We're
participating as guest speakers, and the culminating event for that program for the students is a one-day experience at a college or university setting, and that'll be early next year. In terms of in terms of our infrastructure, we've already talked before about the EV charging pilot stations. We hope to have those up and running at some point next year. We're working on expanding our solar production, working on a pilot solar canopy at one of our schools, a canopy for parking lot lighting that is solar powered. We are working on greatly increasing our renewable energy purchases through offsite solar purchases. We're working through contractual details for our investment grade audits, where we're going to take a look at all of our buildings and really figure out what it is we need to do to improve that infrastructure of the existing buildings to save energy. And we've received a grant from the Maryland Energy Administration to begin to identify opportunities to incorporate net zero energy design for our new buildings. So it's a big infusion right there to help us figure out that. And last but not least, of course, there are many federal funding opportunities that are coming through the federal government, so we're paying very close attention to that, and we've already talked to some of our consultants about how we can take advantage of those.
Awesome. Dr. Duncan?
Thank you.
I think this is awesome, and I'm so pleased to see the diversity of work that the system is undertaking under our new greatly expanded and very aggressive sustainability policy, and really appreciate the work on engaging students, which is becoming much more robust, and particularly shouting out Mr. Meyer, who I know has been working with a pool of students that I am connected with on a very regular basis on a bunch of the projects that they have in some instances initiated and in some instances are partnering with the school system. And so very much appreciate all of this. Thank you. Okay, last but not least, Mr. Riley, you're back again. Just a quick update on our ongoing rollout of our systems upgrades and updates. And in particular, you're going to bring in an issue that I think some of us have been hearing about, the school funding online program, and just to help us better understand that and figure out all the ways that we are looking to better engage with some of our families who are reluctant or unable.
Thanks, Ms. Harris. And to help me with that, I brought up Claudette Adard, who is our administrator in the Office of Finance, who's the functional lead for this project. I don't know if you can just highlight some of the things that we're doing in this area. I talked before about compliance, but innovation as well too. This is an innovative way where we can kind of interact with parents. This system integrates with Synergy as well as our current accounting software. So a lot of benefits here, but Claudette can speak more.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Just as a quick update, I think we went over the functionality of the program back in August, and since we did the implementation in September, we are at roughly 37.6% adoption rate. For reference, in our old system, at the peak of the usage, it was at 30%. So we've surpassed our own goal, and just to put that in numbers, we have about 60,000 families throughout the county who have registered for the program and have used it. Now, what we're doing now is we're reflecting on the schools that have had success, and they're throughout the county. There is no one community that's in all with their elementary, middle, and high schools that are, surpassing others. So what we're going to do is look at those schools that have had success, and when I say success, are over 50% adoption rate, and see what they have done so that we can help those other communities reach that goal and get them set up. Highlights of this program that are different from the one that we used in the past, it's available in 140 languages. So our communities, no matter what language they speak, they can choose that language while they're using the program. So that has been a benefit and very much appreciated for our, many of our users. The thing is people don't use it unless it's time they need to use it. So as field trips pick up, as the testing programs that we have fees for, and as fees pick up, they start in mid-November, they start posting this. So we anticipate the adoption rate to go up, but our goal is really to meet the community where they are so that we can help them get registered, understand the program, and use it.
Thanks, Claudette.
Yes.
And then Any questions on SFO or? So the last update we want to bring is on human capital management, the software that's going to get us out of doing paper timesheets, right? So that's one of the benefits. So last time we had told you there were some staffing issues. I alluded this morning that we have increased FTEs to help us get that through that process, because in Gina's office, it's the same folks that are getting school paid on time are the same folks that are working on this project. So, but so far so good. We're in the middle of Sprint 2, which is one of the areas where they're testing what's already in the system. So we're actually a little behind on that. So we're going to see what happens with these additional FTEs. I don't know if you have anything to add where we're at with the project or.
As Mr. Riley confirmed, we are finishing up Sprint 2, which is an opportunity for MCPS users, my office especially in OHRD, to see the requirements that we had captured in the new system with our own data. So we have the opportunity to play around with it, but it is a long process. The Spring 2 was supposed to end actually this week, but we had to extend it as a result of competing priorities that we have to accomplish. So we will be ending Spring 2 by the end of the calendar year. We will regroup with the implementers and our other partners, which are OTI, the Technology Office, and OHRD, to go over the timeline to see where we are.
Thank you.
Hey, before we leave, I just wanted to use the opportunity to thank Dr. Doctor and Dr. Joftis for all your input over the year. It really is appreciated by the Office of Finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and before we adjourn, just quickly to remind folks that there's still the ability to pay cash for some of these issues. As we know, some of our families culturally and for other reasons don't use electronic payment methods. So, but do appreciate very much the outreach and the continual recognition of the fact that every school community is different and we need to meet them where they are. So thank you very much. With that.
The next meeting.
Oh, when is the next meeting?
January 30th.
January 30th. Oh, okay. So we are adjourned until our next meeting, January 30th. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.